Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight. Actually feels nice to have people here instead of listening to people on Zoom, so positive. We're going to start with our public comment section. I'm going to remind everybody of the rules of decorum. Please refrain from name-calling, calling out staff, and other types of behavior. Treat people how you would like to be treated. And please give your name and address for the record when you come up. I will call you, starting with Chantel Miles.
Your Honor, she has withdrawn.
She withdrew. Okay. Christina Jones.
Christina Jones, 8005 Finland Drive. Last meeting, I was instructed to speak with Tansy Hayward in case I missed something in my orientation to the Parks Board, and I'm here to report that I missed nothing. There is no mention in the Parks Board orientation handbook about what is expected of members once they are appointed. Being a very active board member is an honor and a privilege, one that I do not take lightly. I got an initiative placed on our work plan for this year called Welcome to Raleigh, in which we work towards introducing residents who may be unfamiliar with our park system to all of the amazing parks one at a time. There's been some confusion on what publicity and marketing assistance this initiative would receive from the communications department. After much persistence on my part and a lot of hard work from the Parks Department, our Welcome to Raleigh series is now being promoted, and we are very grateful for that. I bring this up to highlight the importance of council guidance and expectations. Since our program is now being promoted, I'm assuming that it was my place to push as hard as I could to get what I wanted, but how do we ensure that all boards have the same opportunities? Another assumption of mine was that being on a board would lead me to more constructive conversation directly with council. However, our liaison has only joined our meeting twice in the last 18 months, both per my request for his presence. How does council understand what the board is thinking when there doesn't seem to be consistent outreach to those boards? This is so important as the new community engagement department discusses creating their own board. What will their responsibilities be? How will they be appointed or chosen? Residents need to be included, full stop. It gets to dangerous waters when our representatives handpick who they speak to, when they refuse to answer someone who's been consistent in showing up with legitimate and thoughtful concerns. At some point, I hope that council will stop pawning me off onto staff members who are unable to answer my questions because what I'm asking is meant for those who represent me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Peter Gitto.
Hello, Peter Gitto, 7320 Bassett Hall Court, Raleigh. I'm here to talk about Capitol Boulevard and the homeless encampments that we have growing under the 540 bridge. We've had an increase in those encampments over the last year and a half or 2 years since the pandemic, and City Council has not annexed any of that area in. It's all state-owned or private land, but it is the city entrance to Raleigh, and it is incredibly growth there in this large homeless encampment. The DOT, we complained to them. They came out about a month ago and cleaned it up. If I did this on my own front yard, I would have you guys, your representatives, sending me letters to clean up my yard, but they, being the homeless encampment, the encampment itself, can leave the trash all over, can leave the shopping carts on the ground, and you guys as a city are not taking any action to make it safe for people driving when their shopping carts literally laying on the side of the road. The city could take action by annexing in the state DOT land there and then beginning to take action to fix this. You wouldn't get any tax revenue, but you wouldn't get any tax revenue from it anyway. And the 540 and Capitol Boulevard entrance is rated one of the most dangerous intersections in Raleigh by DOT. They're obviously looking to improve that with the $1.5 billion that they're going to spend by knocking down our houses on Capitol Boulevard and going north on Capitol Boulevard. But they forgive this time to do anything about the large homeless encampments. It's no problem that we don't have any rules for them requiring them to wear vests on the roads to be safe at night like Durham does, but can we at least begin to have our public works works people go and pick the trash up. So that way, if they're not going to pick it up, we at least pick it up. Because if I did this in my front yard, you guys would send me notices, you would send me letters, you would fine me, and you would take away my property eventually. So please, please, please take care of it.
Madam
you.
Mayor, if I may make a few comments.
Could I have the city manager address this first and then, yes. Okay.
Okay.
So over the course of the last year, maybe year and a half, staff has been working with our multiple partners in the community to see if we can't address some of the issues that you just raised. And so just know that we are continuing to have those conversations where we've got jurisdiction and the ability to do it within legal.
I understand the jurisdiction, why I said annex it in, because then it's all of ours and we could solve that problem, just like you have 440 does not have this, but 540 does.
There are some legal ramifications of annexation of property, like property ownership. So we can't just annex property, but we are considering all options possible to clean that area up. We're very concerned as well.
DOT, though, property that where they're
Please,
living is what I'm talking about. Sorry.
Please,
Okay.
remember rules of decorum. And she's trying to explain to you where we are. We have been diligently working with the state, with the county. We don't own this property, and there's complications involved with annexation. But Councilmember Cox, whose district is around here, would like to make a couple of statements.
Yes, so I've been following this for quite some time, as you know.
Yes, I do.
What you probably don't know is at our last meeting, the city, in fact, did annex about 18 acres along 540. This was at the request of a developer. So we are expecting that land to be developed as like a 300-plus apartment complex.
The one behind my house, right? That
I'm not sure where exactly.
That's off of Capitol Boulevard to the right of 540.
I'm not sure exactly
So
where you
your
live.
time
but,
is up,
but
and
we
so
can,
we're just trying to address these, okay?
I'm happy to talk to you about that later. But I do want to point out that a lot of that land has been annexed into the city, so we now do have jurisdiction on a lot of land where encampments have been. I was given a copy of a letter from one of our police officers that I guess a few officers went into the area recently, and they've counted more than 350 shopping carts in the woods, which gives an indication of the scope of the problem. And I do implore the city manager and the city staff to do more to help the people that are homeless and ensure that the trash is picked up, because we do, I mean, when you're talking 350 shopping carts and we're talking about bags and bags of trash that I've seen myself and unsanitary conditions, we, the city, need to get people out there to clean the mess up. And there are a lot of complaints coming in from folks such as yourself about this situation. So it's a multi-pronged approach. We need to help the people that are homeless. Some of the land, a lot of the land actually has been annexed into the city, so we do have jurisdiction over those areas, and we do need to take action to clean up the mess. Because, I mean, let's face it, when you're homeless, you know, people are using the outdoors as their bathrooms, and it's creating an unhealthy and unsanitary situation.
Thank you.
You might also want to know that we've had a major discussion about homelessness in our committee. We've reached out to the county, and this was one of the areas identified as, right now, we do have people from the Partnership to End and Prevent Homelessness. They do send outreach workers there to work with people, try and get them what they need. But we also need to work with the county, and we need their leadership on this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Lisa Huguet.
Your Honor, she has also withdrawn.
Okay, thank you. Larry Miller.
My name is Larry Miller, and I live at 510 Glenwood Avenue. I'm president of the Glenwood South Neighborhood Collaborative and on the board of directors of the Downtown Raleigh Alliance. I'm here to urge support for inclusion of funding for Devereux Meadow Park on the next Raleigh City Parks bond. 14-acre site is currently covered primarily by surface parking lots and building used as city maintenance facilities. A site feasibility study, including environmental evaluation, is currently going on and has received positive public feedback for the passive use park. However, no money has been authorized for construction. The proposed park is situated at the gateway to downtown Raleigh along southbound Capitol Boulevard corridor north of P Street. The site presents a tremendous opportunity to create an attractive, iconic park that would be a vast improvement over the current surface parking lot and unsightly buildings. The park would enhance the image of Raleigh for all the visitors to the great city. Devereux Meadow Park would also be the closest available park and green space to the densely populated Glenwood South neighborhood. There are several thousand residents within a few blocks walking distance of the proposed park. In addition, the number of proposed construction projects would add further density to this area. Residents of this area, such as I, choose to live there because we like the advantages of an urban environment. However, that does not mean that we do not value or desire the benefits of a park and green space. The park would also provide a vital transportation link for pedestrians and bikes between downtown Raleigh and neighborhoods in North Raleigh. Indeed, it would help to connect neighborhoods south of downtown to neighborhoods north of downtown. It would be a vital link in expanding the city's greenway system and connecting to bike lanes on West and Harrington Streets that currently end at P Street. The proposed park is in a floodplain and is unsuitable for most development. The proposed use of the park would open up Pigeon House Branch and create wetland habitat where impermeable parking lots currently exist.
Larry, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Haley Kinsler.
Haley Kinsler, 804 Gorman Street, Apartment C. On March 1st, the City Council demonstrated a clear lack of concern for the voting rights of people in the city, especially people of color. More than 55,000 people were redistricted, reducing the majority-minority population in District B from 62% to 54% in a move that was poorly defended by the council and the city attorney. Despite any argument that a new district will be added and a new map will be adopted then, surely the council could have adopted a more equitable map in the meantime, rather than actively disenfranchise their constituents. They consciously voted on a map that moved about 12% of the population of Raleigh, the majority of whom were people of color. Additionally, the city attorney mistakenly stated that Raleigh is not covered by Section 2 of the VRA, and the Southern Coalition for Social Justice has responded to this error in their letter, which reads, "There is no factual or legal basis to claim Raleigh is not covered by Section 2 of the VRA. Raleigh voters should not be misled about their fundamental right to vote. Knowing this, council members who voted to adopt this map, as well as the city attorney, have demonstrated that they are not concerned with voting rights, community engagement, or even basic integrity. If a decision must be justified with misinformation and a lack of honesty, then it is not the right one. There is at least one person on this council who plans to run for a position in the NCGA, but if you have demonstrated that you will actively work to disenfranchise people in Raleigh, how can we trust you to preserve voting rights at the state level? To my neighbors, remember that we are now 217 days away from the election. The city council wants to reduce your voting power because they know they have to in order to stay in office. They do this because they are afraid that if they do not gerrymander, they will not be able to continue to hold their positions. This is time during which you can canvass, register voters, join a campaign, come to community forums, and prepare a plan to vote. If your council member is not interested in preserving your right to vote, then we must fight for it as a community. Thank you.
Next we have Chris Crispman.
Chris Chrisman, 205 Oak Point Court, and I not only live in the city of Oaks, but I live in an oak forest. We could show the next slide. Thank you. We're not seeing it, but I see it here. Okay, shall I continue? Or yes, thank you very much. Okay, so every day when I walk outside, I look at my big, beautiful friends, and I am grateful to the city government that required the builder 35 years ago to save those trees. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, we are seeing signs that perhaps we don't value our mature oaks as we once did, with ugly scarred landscapes everywhere. Next slide, please. A particularly sad one for me is on Hillsboro Street. I call it the Hillsboro Street tree travesty. It's 2.1 acres, and every tree was cut down. Next slide. There were 15 trees of over 20 inches in diameter, and 5 trees, next slide, of over 40 inches in diameter. Huge trees, every one gone. To replace these, there will be understory trees, 19 understory trees, which don't grow as big and will be planted around the peripheral, 13 on Hillsboro Street, 3 on Montgomery Street, and 3 on Fergus Street. Next slide, please. Developers don't always tell the truth and maybe mislead with advertisements about what neighborhoods are going to look like, what new neighborhoods are going to look like. Like in this case, not in my lifetime if I bought that house. Would that tree
Okay.
be that big?
Thank
So
you.
next slide.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Please save the city of Oaks.
Thank you very much. That was creative. I will say we are also getting creative. Thank you to Mayor Pro Tem Stewart and also Councilmember Knight. We have new ordinances coming forward that will address trees, especially on land less than 2 acres. So that is in the works and moving forward. So thank you for your comments. Next, we have Cole McMillan.
Cole McMullen, 10530 Sablewood Drive, Raleigh 27617. Participatory budgeting is a democratic process in which community members decide how to spend part of a public budget. It gives people real power over real money. The New York Times called participatory budgeting revolutionary civics in action. It deepens democracy, builds stronger communities, and creates a more equitable distribution of public resources. A form of participatory budgeting has been implemented in Greensboro, in which residents propose ideas, volunteers develop those ideas into projects, and residents vote on which projects to fund. Durham has implemented a similar participatory budgeting process. In Raleigh, a balancing act tool simulator was used to engage residents regarding the allocation of federal funds from the American Rescue Plan. This tool allowed residents to allocate federal dollars to various budget categories. In my opinion, this balancing act tool was a much more engaging survey than the short budget priority survey that was provided for the 2022-23 fiscal year budget, in which residents were allowed to rank some vaguely worded phrases. In the future, I would like to see the City of Raleigh implement 2 changes regarding community engagement for the fiscal year budget. First would be the inclusion of a participatory budgeting program like those implemented in Greensboro and Durham. Second would be to use a balancing act tool simulator for the fiscal year budget, like what was used for the American Rescue Plan funds. Further, to provide true power to the people and residents of Raleigh, the city government should have to stay within a certain range of the balancing act tool survey results. Providing these additional opportunities for meaningful engagement with residents regarding our public dollars would more accurately represent the people of Raleigh. Thank you.
Thank you. Please note, we will have a public hearing on the budget, and I hope you'll come and let us know what you think. Thank you. Dylan Boters. Is Dylan here? Is Dylan here to speak? Okay. Karen Wing.
I'm Karen Wing. I live at 3904 Laurel Manor Court. I am representing the Laurel Hills neighborhood to state our opposition to the proposed development at 4008 Laurel Hills Road. While the development meets recently revised UDO requirements, building an incredibly dense 76 townhome development of 999 square feet each in the midst of a 70-year-old neighborhood of primarily single-family standalone homes would be inconsistent with the future land use map, which calls for low-density residential in this area. I am here to request that the application for it not be approved until important concerns are addressed. First, we request a traffic study be completed regarding whether Laurel Hills Road can safely handle the traffic this development would add. It is a winding, hilly, narrow, old state road that has consistently been in the list of priorities for traffic calming measures. Limited sight distances and no sidewalks are already concerning before replacing the R4 zoning with a development with 12 homes per buildable acre. A traffic study should be required. Second, the entire area, but especially Laurel Manor Court, has had significant stormwater issues, including a needed repair in the city's right-of-way, and there are also stormwater issues on adjacent Hillsboro Way in the city's infrastructure. Given these major issues in an already fragile area, this application should not be approved until the existing stormwater issues are addressed, and a critical examination of the watershed should be required. Finally, we are requesting the outlet into the middle of Laurel Manor Court be eliminated. A street that's just over 300 feet long with 9 homes and virtually no through traffic cannot and should not have to support the traffic from this major development. We know the City Council had noble reasons for instituting the compact development process, but we ask that you temporarily hold approval of the building application scope 0151-2021 for 4008 Laurel Hills Road until these concerns can be addressed.
Thank you. Next, we have Luis Velasco.
Lou Velasco, 511 John Haywood Way, 27604. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you and ask for your support of the Devereaux Meadow Park. I'd like to adopt Larry Miller's previous statements in support of the park. And I know several of you already have indicated support of the park. I just wanted to give you a little bit of context as to why there's some passion to have this park here. I'm a first-generation American, moved to Raleigh, North Carolina in 2000. I've lived in various parts of the United States, and as we're all very well aware, Raleigh is considered one of the most livable places in America, in the best country in the world. That's pretty high level stuff, and I want to keep it that way. And as we go through this explosion of population, I think what we need to do is to remember that we need to keep our fundamentals there and the balance of what makes our city so great. I lived in the suburbs since 2000 until 2018, then moved with my wife downtown, and we just love the urban environment. But of course, we want some greenways as well. And I know that in the large picture of things, it's not the most important thing perhaps, but what I will say to you is what makes Raleigh so great is that balance and those fundamentals that makes our city so livable. And so we can't forget that. We've had a population explosion over the past few years. We're bringing in wonderful jobs, and with that, property taxes are increasing and the tax revenue is increasing. So I implore that you remember that this population and tax reason should also go for
your time
the
is
park.
up, Luis.
I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shay X.
It's Shy X, 6325 Falls of Noose Road. As Louise was just saying a second ago, Raleigh is considered one of the most livable cities in this country right now, but that's not a reality for a lot of people, including people like me. As long as I've lived in this city, I have not known what secure housing looks like. As long as I've lived in this city, I've seen a problem with homelessness. Just coming here today after I walked in the rain and rode the bus to talk at this meeting, I had 2 people come ask me for money and I gave it to them, even though I didn't have it myself. There are black families being displaced continuously and continuously and continuously in this country. And now I'm seeing that happen in my own city. And if you don't believe me, go talk to the members in Southeast Raleigh, because that community is losing their homes. And when you put people out in their homes and you put them out in these streets, do you understand the type of lives that they have to live? You have families, mothers, children living out in these streets. They have to stay in hotels. And that's where Raleigh has a lot of extended stay hotels, and this is what these families do to survive. And they get trapped in these cycles because you cannot get out of it, because it takes one mess up to mess up your life for a very long time, and it puts you in a cycle of chronic homelessness. And this city has not been putting what they need to do to protect these people. And I'm asking you to do better. I've lived in this city a long time and I love it, but I've also come to hate it as I've learned more about what is going on in it. I cannot trust the people sitting at this table. I cannot trust the people sitting at the table that look at me, because what you're voting on and what decisions you're making are putting more and more people at risk every day. You may not have my vote in this upcoming election, but I do have a few people. Mary Black, District A, Wanda Hunter, District C, and Joshua Bailey, City Council at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Josh Bradley.
Question before I start. Never mind. Joshua Bradley, 1324 Spring Lawn Court, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27609. Good evening. First, does the city have plans in place to ensure workers can afford to live here? With the accelerated gentrification of the city, it is impossible for lower wage workers to live in the city. These workers are the heart and soul of the city, and without them, this city can't function. I think this council needs to look long and hard at the long-term consequences of their plans and projects before moving forward on them. For example, what is the purpose of bus rapid transit when the associated rezoning of the transit corridor will push out the folks who would use the buses? Protections need to be put in place to prevent this, or this project will fail. The upwardly mobile professional class are not the primary users of public transit, it's the workers. Everyone should know by now that we need to move away from cars to public transit because of the environment. But why push out the primary users? This seems like it's going to be prone to be a failed experiment at the expense of the workers. Walkability can be desirable for a city, but without the proper infrastructure, it can be ableist and classist. It would be dependent on low crime and plentiful housing for everyone. The only way that was ever statistically shown to reduce crime is to lift people out of poverty, not over-policing. Let's not put the cart before the horse and tackle the real problems that face this city, problems like gentrification, low wages, and police violence. Second, I was able to listen to Patrick's thing, and it's good. I'm not going to come down on you. Debate the other day, during which he said that he believed in a housing-first solution to problem for people that are unhoused. While honestly surprised, I think that was a great idea, and must admit that I had not noticed the council moving in this direction. Now is the time to start. Chop, chop.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Timothy Martin. Is Mr. Martin here? Okay, I'm going to go back to Dylan, if he has come in. Okay, well, that will complete public comment for this evening. Next, we will go to matters scheduled for public hearing. The first item on the agenda is our annual housing action plan, and Lamont Taylor, or Oh, okay. Taking Lamont's place tonight, if you'd introduce yourself and present the staff report.
Yes. Waiting for the PowerPoint to load. Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. I'm John Niffenegger from Housing and Neighborhoods, and I will be providing a brief presentation on the Annual Action Plan. The Annual Action Plan serves as the city's application to HUD for entitlement funding, provides a framework for strategic and production goals, and is directly tied to the city's 5-year consolidated plan. The 2022-2023 Annual Action Plan is the 3rd year of the current consolidated plan. This is a timeline of the public participation for the plan. And here is an agenda for tonight's presentation. The 3 goals and priorities identified in the consolidated plan are: increase the supply of affordable housing, increase services to build self-sufficiency and sustainability, and enhance the homeless to housing continuum. These are the proposed uses of our FY22-23 entitlement funds, which include home, the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, and the Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG. These are our Emergency Solutions Grant funding recommendations. These funds are provided to nonprofits serving those individuals at risk of or experiencing homelessness. And these are our funding recommendations for the CDBG-funded Community Enhancement Grant Program, which provides funding to nonprofits serving low-income Raleigh residents. There were multiple opportunities for public participation, including 2 public hearings and 3 public meetings. Outreach was also extended to community and stakeholder groups. In addition, residents could submit written comments to the department. All comments received will be included in the final action plan. Following tonight's public hearing, Council will be asked to adopt the action plan on May 3rd, after which it will be submitted to HUD. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions? Okay. Thank you. There's some people signed up to speak in support and in opposition. So we'll start with Kim Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Baldwin and City Councilors, for allowing me to speak today. I'm Kim Crawford, the Executive Director of the Raleigh Wake Partnership to End and Prevent Homelessness. Homelessness in our community has been going up slightly every year since 2016. Due to the pandemic, we are most certainly experiencing a spike in homelessness. Given the reduction in shelter beds of over 200 since May 2020, it is our belief that unsheltered homelessness has increased, and as a result, overall homelessness has increased. People of color are disproportionately homeless to the tune of nearly 7 to 1. The inability of people to find and afford housing is the major driver of homelessness and the major solution to it. Everything works better when people have safe, stable, affordable housing. During the past 2 years, you have generously provided assistance through the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan. These resources are not going to be enough, though, to end homelessness, but they can surely reverse its course. Given these opportunities and challenges, we recommend the use of funds to help people with the highest needs. With this in mind, we would propose a drop-in day center. These past few white flag months have made it clear that there is a critical need for a place for people to go during the day, not only to get out of the elements, but to connect with critical resources, focusing on ending homelessness, not simply to help the homeless be comfortable in their homelessness. The allocation of resources to strategies that are specifically designed to reduce racial disparities and eliminate racial disproportionality, and specifically a separate application process from the county. There is simply too much confusion and perceived conflicts of interest involved in the combined application process, and most certainly, affordable housing. In closing, while people experiencing homelessness have suffered, the resources that the City of Raleigh has provided has ended homelessness for hundreds of people, and we thank you for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Leon Cook?
Good evening. Leon Cook, 1500 Whittington Drive, Raleigh. And I'm here representing members of the Wake County Housing and Justice Coalition, and we are opposed to the budgeting as it's drafted. My part of it is, according to the draft, there is $2.5 million allocated to housing rehabilitation, but only 153 of the units from affordable housing production fall under rehabilitation. If this is all that's being invested, then more money should be promised and prioritized to housing rehabilitation. In terms of property maintenance with city property, $170,000 was being allocated. How quickly does the city expect that to be used up? Furthermore, more money should also be put into relocation. For decades, the City of Raleigh has been displacing and gentrifying the black communities of Raleigh without any form of compensation or reparation for people that are being forced out, not voluntarily, but forced out. The draft is only proposing to provide $2,000 for relocation demolition funds. More money needs to be put into relocation because the city is pulling people out without offering anything for relocation. In terms of economic development, only $2,000 is allocated. We would like to know what exactly people will do with only $2,000. We see that $380,000 is allocated for program income reserve. We understand that there is a need for money to be in reserve, but considering the housing crisis and what people have already said about homelessness and affordability, the injustice we are facing, the city should consider actually putting some of that reserve money to use for the people who are most immediately impacted. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Octavia Rainey.
Octavia Rainey, 1516 East Lane Street. I'm here to speak on relocation. As we know, relocation is in the annual action plan. Relocation is a big, big problem because since 1955, with the Raleigh Redevelopment Commission, the city has used relocation to empty out the black communities. It is a detriment to the black communities. I'm asking the city, we must look at relocation. It is terrible. It is really, really terrible. And example, College Park, all of that was relocation. Black people did not come back. And what did come back was 3/5 black homeowners. That was it. That was it. And you use HUD federal funds to do that. But if you take a look at from 1955, from Smoky Hollow to Fort Ward, Thompson Hunter 1, Thompson Hunter 2, South Park, you see the devastation. You really, really see it. Blacks no longer live in the inner city. They have been forced out, priced out, and shut out. They don't live there. So you must go back and look at relocation. I used to work for the city, so I know very much about relocation because I used to use relocation myself. Relocation is just the dangling of the carrot. You tell the people how much money they get, you don't care where they move to. You never have, but they move out of Southeast Raleigh. I'm going to say in closing, when Housing power is voting power. When you use relocation and you get rid of the black vote, they don't vote in their precincts because they don't come back. So, and HUD rules state you can use relocation, but you can also use temporary relocation so they can come back. So I think y'all got this backwards now, and it needs to change. Black people need to be welcome. Black people need to be able to come back in their neighborhoods, but you price them out, shut them out, and that's not right. And one more other thing, Devereaux Meadows was a slave plantation, and y'all need to change that name. And I'm coming back to talk about Devereaux Meadows. Bye.
Hua Huang.
Hua Huang, 7401 Ebenezer Church Road. First, I want to preface by saying that I thought each side has 8 minutes, but I digress. So I'll go on. As it is right now, we need more money and investment in Fair Housing Hearing Board. Based on the budget, the Fair Housing Hearing Board is only getting $5,000 during the fiscal year, and years ago, I believe the Fair Housing Hearing Board was actually receiving at least $10,000 for the work they do. Cutting funds on Fair Housing Hearing Board means that the board does not get enough money, all the while we have a need for their expertise to address affordable housing injustice that we are facing here in Raleigh. Meanwhile, I have noted that the city has allocated $100K to White Flag Shelter and South Wilmington Street. I would like to know, when did the report on these two projects get made? What were the metrics for their success? How do they plan to meet their goals? How do we know that they are deserving of $100K if they have not met their previous goals? I've noted that White Flag Shelter will help 650 homeless persons. So how many more homelessness are there in the city out of the that you're actually helping? And what is the city's plan for the outreach? And while we are on the topic of goals, I would also like to know more about one of the city's key priorities, the homeless to housing continuum. What are their measurements of success and what are their goals? This all needs to be goal-oriented. And the housing working group, the housing committees, Larry Jarvis, for example, need to produce reports showing how South Wilmington Street, for example, was successful enough to deserve $100K this year, while the Fair Housing Hearing Board only gets $5,000. Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Lisa Huge.
She had withdrawn. She was not here earlier as well.
Okay. Cole McMullen.
Cole McMullen, 10530 Sablewood Drive, Raleigh 27617. I am here to call for opposition to the draft annual housing action plan as it is. First of all, the draft needs a clear definition to all the titles. For example, on your fiscal year 2022-23 housing and community development budget, we would like to know, what does the acquisition and disposition entail? What does relocation and demolition entail? $4 million on public and private partnerships. How exactly will this money get used to address affordable housing needs? This is similar to the city's affordable housing bond in 2020, where everything is in buckets. Is your $4 million essentially giving away 12% of your budget to private developers as favors? According to the draft, there's $2.8 million allocated to housing rehabilitation, but only 153 of the units from affordable housing production falls under rehabilitation. If this is all that's being invested, then more money should be prioritized at the housing rehabilitation. Currently, the housing rehabilitation program has a 3 to 4 year waiting period. What are the demographics of previous recipients, and how has funding for that program been allocated across all districts? In terms of property maintenance with city property, $170,000 was being allocated. How quickly does the city expect this funding to get used up? Furthermore, more money should also be put into relocation. For decades, the city of Raleigh has been displacing and gentrifying the black community without any form of compensation or reparation to the people that are being forced out. The draft is only proposing to provide $2,000 for relocation and demolition funds. more money needs to be put into relocation because the city is putting people out without offering anything for relocation. And I would like to support previous comments that relocations include being able to bring people back to their homes. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Wanda Hunter.
Wanda Hunter, 112 Maple Street. In the annual action plan, there's some very vague language. The strategic acquisition to prioritize affordable housing adjacent to transit. That can't be true to what the plans are for the BRT. Right now, with what's going on Wilmington Street, you're planning to take the BRT plan straight through one of the buildings in Heritage Park. Heritage Park is affordable housing. On the Western Boulevard plans for the BRT, it's planning to go through a building in Kentwood and part of some affordable housing in Method. So that's not preserving affordable housing. The Fair Housing Hearing Board needs more money for the work that they do and the outreach to the community. The rehabilitation program has a 2 to 3 year wait list. And like was previously said, we need the demographics of the previous recipients and how that money has been allocated across all districts. Relocation money needs to be increased because according to HUD, there is a portion that requires you to have that, and that's the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policies Act of 1970, along with Section 104D of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. If you haven't read it, I would definitely take note and read into that because it requires you for relocation to make sure and ensure relocation assistance is provided to displaced persons to lessen the emotional and financial impact of displacement, to ensure that no individual family is displaced unless decent, safe, and sanitary housing is available within the displaced person's financial means, to help improve the housing conditions of displaced persons living in substandard housing, and to encourage and expedite acquisition by agreement and without coercion. So those are some things that we need to look into about the annual action plan.
Thank you. If staff wouldn't mind just explaining that this is a portion of the money that we use for supportive housing and affordable housing, and then some of the other resources. I know it's a hearing, but I think there might be some confusion.
Repeat your question.
Yes, could you explain some of the other funding that is available that we use for these purposes?
All right, we did talk about its required application for our HUD entitlement funding, which is Community Development Block Grant, Emergency Solutions Grant, and Home. But the draft plan also includes local funding, a substantial amount, including funds from the recently passed housing bond, as well as the funding from the Affordable Housing Fund.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
I was looking for some more specifics. Like there were questions about how much money is used for the loan program, how much money is used for home improvements, when I believe that's $6 million each in those buckets from the Affordable Housing Bond, and any other information you might have.
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but happy to provide them in the manager's update. I do know that bond funds are going towards some of those programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. We can then close the hearing, and this will come before us at our meeting in May. Okay, thank you. Next, we have rezoning TCZF 20, Z6620, Crabtree Valley, PD.
Good evening, Bynum Walter, Planning and Development. So this is a text change to zoning conditions that is going to modify a PD on Homewood Banks Drive, and the amendment covers an area that's a little bit over 13 acres. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the future land use map. It is inconsistent with the urban form map, and the Planning Commission does recommend approval. So just a reminder, a plan development is a very special, kind of tailored, custom zoning district that is defined by the applicant and that can also be modified by the applicant, which is what's happening tonight. So here's a look at the site, just on the south side of Crabtree Valley Mall, just north of the Mark. So the PD was originally approved in 2012. The Mark was constructed as Phase 1 in 2014 and was amended once in 2020 with a new building layout and some other details, and is being amended again. So what's changing, or I'm sorry, the highlights of the master plan that's in place now, 232 dwelling units, 60,000 square feet of retail, some office space and hotel rooms, and they're proposing 162 dwelling units here. And the building height currently is limited to 200 feet, and they're proposing instead 6 stories. So what's changing, there's a new site layout here, so new location for building, parking and driveways, an increase in the cap for retail use, and also combining what has been previously 2 phases, phase 2 and 3 of the master plan, into a single phase 2. Remember, the Mark is phase 1. So they are removing some of the existing PD standards that address building materials, outdoor lighting and seating, and they are putting in place some alternatives around parking, and also establishing a new standard with the PD for monument signs. Most of the conversation around this case has been around transportation. The developer has agreed to provide 2 wooden signal poles and a signal cabinet, either on the rezoning site or in the public right-of-way. And if they are not able to make that installation, that they would pay fee in lieu so that the city could make the installation. Here's a look at the proposed building footprint and parking arrangement. So Crabtree Valley Avenue is on the top right part of the site. Homewood Banks Drive is on the left. You can see the parking and driveway kind of circle a U-shaped building here. So this is inconsistent with the urban form map, so they aren't, the way the PD is structured, the way that configuration of parking is around the building, not consistent with the urban form map. But it is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. A number of consistent policies here, including one of the area plan policies in the Crabtree area plan. A couple of inconsistent policies here at the frontage, which is in line with that urban form issue that I mentioned earlier. Also inconsistent with Crabtree hillsides and design unity in the Crabtree area. Again, Planning Commission recommends approval. The applicant is here to answer questions that you might have, and I can answer any questions you might like to ask before the public hearing opens.
Okay, do we have any questions of staff? Okay. I am going to open the hearing. No one has signed up to speak in opposition. We have Isabel Maddox here for the applicant. Normally we would allot 8 minutes per side. I don't know if, do you have a presentation prepared?
I do have a presentation. I don't want to belabor the point. I think the key thing here to know is that, you know, when you do a PD, you have to attach a site plan. And this zoning was amended in 2020, and they attached a site plan. But the site plan is one that the planning staff says we can't approve this site plan because of where the driveway was and a couple of other things. So we came back in with a new site plan. We've addressed those issues that the staff had a problem with, and we have been going through a process, a parallel process with our site plan. And so that's one reason the case is kind of old, is that we've had a site plan coursing through the system this whole time, and we're ready to have that approved as soon as the zoning is approved. So that's the primary thing we are changing here is the site plan. We do believe we're proposing 160 units, so it's going to be a reduction in traffic. Senior targeted units is what we're proposing here. David Brown is here, who's our landscape architect, who can go into details if anybody has any questions about those. But that's generally what we're doing. We're trying to get a site plan that is approvable, and we have that, which is ready to be approved. Anybody has any questions?
Do we have any questions? Councilmember Cox?
The main question I have is regarding stormwater controls. I mean, what's being planned for this PD for stormwater controls? Because it is in an area where Crabtree Creek floods, it floods the mall, and there's a lot of impervious surface out there already.
Yeah,
so what's being done to address that?
Interestingly, okay, when this case was approved back in 2012, and then the first phase was done, there were 4 lots, one of which is Lot 4, which has all the open space, has a stormwater facility. So all that is there. We allocated impervious coverage to each of the lots. So that's already in place, and David Brown can probably give you better detail on that. But there's a significant stormwater facility there now, and we have impervious limitations for each site that we have to abide by. David, you want to add something to that?
That's actually a good summary.
Yeah.
There is a comprehensive stormwater management facility for both Phase 1 and Phase 2. It was previously permitted about 2014. It's been in operation since, and I checked fairly recently. They're up to date on their inspection, so I think we're good.
So then for the record, are we saying that this development will not cause an increase in the stormwater runoff beyond what's already happening?
We're not increasing the amount of impervious area in the allotment, we're not exceeding the design of the current pond.
Yeah, I understand that, but you're going to build that impervious surface. So my question is, will this increase the amount of stormwater coming off the system, coming out of the land? Or, I mean, we usually operate under the principle that we're not making things any worse than what it already is.
Okay. And I will say this, what the site plan on the table this evening has less impervious surface than what was originally designed for. So I think we could say this plan is a reduction of impervious area. But I think anytime you build a building, you're increasing runoff to that. It first goes through the stormwater device.
But we will be limited. We cannot increase the rate of runoff any greater.
That's what I'm trying to get at, is the rate.
Yeah, no, we
The
won't
rate.
increase the rate of from what exists today.
Okay, thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I will close the hearing then. Do we have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion at the proper time. Ready? Thank you. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated April 5, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, clerk, that was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, next we have rezoning Z6820 Hillsboro Street and Bagwell Avenue.
Yes, ma'am. This is a new public hearing for a case that you've heard previously. I was just waiting to see if the slides are going to come up on the bigger screens. So again, this is a request to rezone just over an acre from NX4 with shop front and also some R6 zoning to a combination of CX5 shop front with conditions and RX3 with an urban limited frontage with conditions. This is a new public hearing. You've heard this once already, and the case has been revised and to a less restrictive district, which is why we're having a new hearing. And so the new request is 5 stories on the majority of the site. The previous request was 7. And then RX3 with an urban limited frontage and conditions on the northernmost portion of the height, that northern 45 feet of the site. So what's the conditions here? So they are prohibiting some uses. They're prohibiting commercial uses in that RX portion on the northern part of the site. They're limiting the location of retail in relationship to Hillsboro Street, so retail cannot be more than 112 feet deep off of Hillsboro Street. They've provided for a public amenity area along Hillsboro Street and also an art installation visible from Hillsboro Street. They've provided condition that the residential structures on Bagwell, that if they are redeveloped, they would be documented, and also that they would be made available for relocation. They have provided a condition around materials on construction of the site. They've provided bicycle and scooter parking in excess of code requirements. They have specified some facade articulation along Hillsboro Street, and also provided for canopies or awnings on that Hillsboro Street facade, and variations of depth there. The height is limited to a total of 68 feet in that CX5 portion of the site, so the bulk of the site on the south side there. They have said that rooms may not be rented individually. They will provide a dog waste station. And then their final condition, which is new and makes the case inconsistent overall with the comprehensive plan, whereas previously it was consistent, specifies driveway location and a reduction of spacing requirements for driveways on Hillsboro Street. And of course, my friends from transportation are here to back me up on this and can answer more detailed questions. But overall, would suggest that this worsens the pedestrian safety and comfort and sort of the broader goals of walkability on Hillsboro Street, inconsistent with a handful of policies. Similar recent developments on Hillsboro Street do not include driveway access on Hillsboro Street. And given that the previous determination of consistency overall with the plan involved benefits of walkability, we're now saying the request is inconsistent because of this addition of this condition. So the change here because of the changes they've made in the base districts and the conditions, the maximum number of units is going down from 144 to 112, and the overall office square footage is also going down from 81,000 to 73,000 square feet. Again, this has always been the case. The CX is inconsistent with the neighborhood mixed use designation on the future land use map, and the requested RX is inconsistent with the low-scale residential on the northern part of the site. So a number of consistent policies here. I've already talked quite a bit about the inconsistency, and it is inconsistent with the plan. Planning Commission, of course, reviewed the earlier version of this case, a split vote there. RHDC voted to support the previous request, and of course with that condition for documentation, that pleased them in terms of their request for the case. What questions could I answer for you before you hear from the applicant and open the public hearing in general?
Any questions for Bynum? Okay, thank you. We will open the public hearing. Again, no one has signed up in opposition. Michael Birch is here on behalf of the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Michael Birch, Longleaf Law Partners here on behalf of the applicant. I do, even though no one signed up in opposition, I do want to reserve some time for some other folks here that are here to speak on the case. Just want to get here. So, again, this case has been before you a number of times. We initially had our public hearing in January of this year. Just a reminder, the purpose of this case is to facilitate redevelopment of these properties at the intersection of Hillsboro and Bagwell for a mixed-use project that will add to the vibrancy of Hillsboro Street. It will accommodate density along one of the city's most, well transit-served and pedestrian-friendly streets, and at the same time, the conditions that we've added will mitigate impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. Throughout this process, which is about to reach 2 years, we've been working with a number of stakeholders, including Raleigh Historic Development Commission, Hillsboro Street Community Service Corporation, Hillsboro Wade CAC, and a number of residents in the surrounding area who are here this evening. These conditions represent a compromise that address key issues, and again, I just want to thank Ms. Donna Bailey, Mr. Frank Harmon, and a number of other folks who are here this evening for working with us during this process. Bynum touched on a number of conditions. I just want to highlight the major changes since we were last here. One, a reduction in height from 7 stories to 5 stories. Not only that, we limited our height to 68 feet, and that is the height that is allowed today on the majority of the property that's already zoned for 4 stories. So 4 stories would allow 68 feet in height. That's what we've limited our 5-story request to. Second, we've prohibited rent by the room. So we're no longer limiting the types of bedrooms per unit that we can do, but at the same time, we are addressing the community concern about a community that would be pure student housing. And then finally, we have required an access point on Hillsboro Street, which will mitigate traffic impact on Bagwell Avenue, which is a narrow street without sidewalks in the residential portion. So I do want to just touch on that Hillsboro Street access condition, since that is the one that took this case from consistent to inconsistent. I think requiring an access point on Hillsboro Street still allows for safe vehicular and pedestrian movement around the site. This will reduce the number of trips on Bagwell Avenue. The redevelopment will still reduce the number of access points on Hillsboro Street. There are currently 2 today, and there will be only 1 upon redevelopment. Redevelopment will also require closure of an access point on Bagwell Avenue, which is located very close to the intersection with Hillsboro Street. So that's eliminating another unsafe condition. And finally, the project will be constructing wider sidewalks along Hillsboro Street and Bagwell Avenue, wider than those that exist around the site today. So big picture, redevelopment of the site, even with this condition, will improve the vehicular and pedestrian safety. So even though this condition is, or with this condition, the case is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, we think it's reasonable and in the public interest, because this will allow locating density where it should be located along a transit-served corridor, one of the most walkable streets in the city, and at the same time, we've been able to work with the community and add conditions that mitigate the impacts of this project. So with that, again, want to leave the rest of my time for those who are here, but also answer any questions that the council may have.
Councilmember Knight?
Do you have a map or drawing showing exactly where the access will be on Hillsboro?
No, we don't have a map showing exactly where it will be. The issue is we had to require, well, essentially, the standard is a spacing standard relative to other driveways. We expect that the driveway will be probably towards that eastern edge of the property, farthest from the intersection, probably similar to where that existing driveway is today.
And so it'll be a right-in only and a right-out only?
That's correct. And I will say the condition only speaks to an access on Hillsboro Street, but we will intend to also have an access on Bagwell. So because of the way the property is, the topography of the property, we think the access point off of Hillsboro Street will serve one level of a deck, and then the access off Bagwell will serve another level of a deck, but those 2 levels, won't be interconnected, because to do that would just obliterate all the parking that could be provided in there, given the size of the property. So what this does is it ensures that not all of the project traffic will be utilizing Bagwell Avenue.
So do you have a percentage of which, or an estimate of what percentage would we go out on Bagwell versus Hillsboro?
I think we anticipate the majority of the trips that will utilize Hillsboro Street will probably be our retail, employees and visitors, visitors to the retail space, and that the residents, to the extent that they have cars, would utilize the Bagwell access point.
And so the neighbors agree with this?
Yes,
approach?
they requested that we, require an access point onto Hillsboro Street. Yes.
And being very clear, they understand what the inconsistencies are with a lot of the city's policies?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Right. Thank you.
Okay. No, it's 3 minutes, 42 seconds remaining.
I was Madam Mayor, I was going to request respectfully if we could be allotted 8 minutes. That was our understanding for tonight.
No,
We sort
no
of
one's-
organized ourselves.
No one signed up.
There's no sign up for public
There was a
hearing
sign up
comment.
required, helping us manage through COVID. So that we'll
So,
go-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. 3
With
minutes,
all
42
due
seconds.
respect, I think everybody who's here to speak tonight was very clear from the website that there was no sign up for public meetings now that we've gone in person. So none of us signed up with that knowledge. So I would respectfully ask that we be allowed the 8 minutes. Just, we've organized ourselves to represent all the people with 3 people speaking, and we'll be as fast as we can. But it would feel unfair to feel like we're being penalized for not signing up when we all read online that there was no sign up needed, and I'd be happy to send you a screenshot if
Yeah,
that's
I
necessary.
have sign-ups for every other public hearing.
There
Typically,
is.
we do 8 minutes per side, and so if you're in favor, then Michael Birch was in favor and took some of the 8 minutes, and so, and there's no one signed up opposed. So, I
So
think
you have the remainder of the time.
Then I would like to speak opposed to the case.
And, well, you can do that, but it's still 3 minutes and 47 seconds, or 42.
Then I'm going to I would ask that I'm going to make my comments extremely quick so that I can allow
Could
the
you
other
give your name
folks
and
to
address
speak.
for the record, too,
Sure.
please? Thank you.
Tika Hicks, 117 West Park Drive. I'm a former planning commissioner. I served as vice chair twice during my 6 years on the commission. I would like to thank the applicant's representative for working with us. We very much appreciate the work that's gone into this process, working with residents and neighbors. I'm not going to list the conditions that he came up with, but I would respectfully ask that you support this case based on the conditions that are provided, in that they uphold the future land use map, the intent of the future land use map, and the area plan, and what the neighbors have expressed that they would like to see for this piece of property.
Okay, thank you. If we could stop the time, please.
Hi, Kevin Collins, 29 Bagwell. I'm representing a group of our neighbors and homeowners on Bagwell. We live in a short, narrow street without sidewalks. The only 2 options for entering and exiting the street are both already bottlenecks. We're 1 block away from Fred Olds to our north, elementary school, and 1 block from NC State to our south. Those of us who live on Bagwell, we experience safety concerns daily. We compete with a great deal of existing traffic for our space to drive, walk, and park. So safety is a major concern for us, especially we have seniors and retirees and families with children, students, both NC State and Fred Olds. And we love the neighbor's walkability. We want it protected. There isn't a street along the Hillsboro Street corridor that we feel is less suitable for adding traffic than our street, Bagwell Avenue. The requirement for a driveway on Hillsboro Street is the most critical to the safety of our pedestrians and all pedestrians, I feel like, and to diminishing traffic jams along Bagwell and our connecting street on the other end, Everett Avenue. There's already an existing driveway at that location on Hillsboro Street. And since this project is 2 parcels being combined into 1, it's the only one on that side that's needed. Also want to say thank you to the councilors who supported allowing time for our community to dialogue with the developer and come to favorable conditions for all parties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I had submitted some images. The site, I'm sorry, I'm Frank Harmon. I live at 114 Brooks Avenue, 1 block away from this site. You see the site there on the left with the little red and white service station? Across the street, you see a 4-story building that's now 10 years old, and it's the sort of building that I think makes sense on Hillsboro Street. It increases density, but at the same time, it pays attention politely to the neighborhood. Next image, please. This is a 4-story, 60 feet height, in contrast to 7 stories, 90 feet height, which had originally been proposed, and I think you can see the difference in the two. The next. There are plenty of good examples of 5 stories at 60 feet. Remember, we're approving 68 on Hillsboro Street. For example, this one at 2304 Hillsboro Street. It's 5 stories and 60 feet high. We think it makes sense on the street and it makes sense to the neighborhood adjacent. The next. Here's a similar project going up at the corner of Boylan Avenue and Peace, and it's going to be a very good neighbor. And the next. This is one of the earliest UDO staff-approved projects on Hillsboro Street. It shows what we're trying to avoid. It's 6 stories and it overpowers an existing 100-year-old 2-story building. And the next. This, on the other hand, is a really nice example on Enterprise Street and Hillsboro Street of a new development. Oops.
Mr. Herman, your time is up. I'm sorry.
My time up. Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to close the hearing. Councilmember Fort?
I'll be making a motion unless there's more questions.
I think we're good.
Thank you. This is my motion to approve. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated April 5th, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Branch. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. I want to thank the applicant and the residents for working together on this. It was a long process, but I think everybody ended up pleased with where we landed. So thank you, everyone, for your patience, diligence, and hard work. Okay, next is Z5421, 5000 Lewisburg Road.
Yes, ma'am. This is a request to rezone 11.28 acres from a combination of R1 and R6 to OX3 with parkway frontage and conditions. And also, I'm sorry, the OX3 is existing. The whole thing's going to be RX7 with conditions in the end, if you approve. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan, but it is inconsistent with the future land use map. Planning Commission recommended approval, and the objections there were related to the requested height of they're asking for 7, but they're limiting in their conditions to 6 stories. So here's a look at the site. We're on the south side of Lewisburg. There's a pending administrative site review for this church across the street, and there's a power easement that runs along the west side of the site here. So here's a look at the site from Lewisburg. So they have prohibited some uses here. They have limited the total number of units to no more than 260. They've limited their building height, as I said, to 6 stories and 90 feet. Even though they're asking for the RX7 district, I think they're looking for a little bit of flexibility there. They are going to provide an 8-foot wide pedestrian path from internal sidewalks to the Greenway corridor on the site. And they're also requiring a 25-foot wide planted buffer along Lewisburg Road. So they're not offering a frontage specifically, but they are offering something approximate in their conditions. So the entitlement increase here is significant increase in the number of units, and because they're going to RX, conceivably if they build a public street on the site, they could have 4,000 square feet of office, or combined 4,000 square feet of office and or retail on the ground floor in a corner unit and an intersection of 2 public streets. Consistent with the plan overall, as I mentioned, the frontage condition and the future land use map issue both that I've already mentioned. If this is approved by you, it would amend our future land use map from moderate scale residential to medium scale residential. The density that they're looking for here and the height are more in keeping with that more intense residential designation on future land use map. Mr. Cox, when we scheduled the public hearing, you had asked some questions about Parkway on Lewisburg, the Parkway frontage on Lewisburg. We did provide information in the packet. Overall, we've seen one case remove that existing Parkway frontage and provide a similar landscape area. And then 4 zoning cases have not included they didn't have the Parkway to begin with, and included instead landscape conditions, and 1 applied Parkway for a portion of the frontage. So I'm happy to answer questions for you before you hear from the applicant and I don't think anybody else has signed up for this public hearing, but happy to answer questions there.
Any questions for Bynum? Okay, thank you. I will open the hearing. We have no one signed up in opposition. Jamie Schwedler is here on behalf of the applicant.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm Jamie Schwadler of 301 Fayetteville Street with Parker Poe here on behalf of the applicant. We do have a presentation prepared, and I'm happy to run through that. Given I don't believe there's any opposition, I'm also happy to answer questions at the pleasure of council.
Councilmember Cox.
Yeah, I'll just focus on one aspect of this rezoning. I had a great meeting with the developer who is very empathetic about trying to preserve as much of the Parkway frontage as possible on Lewisburg. There is a utility easement that goes through the property, so to the extent possible, the developer did agree, and I'll take that as a statement that you agree with that they will provide Parkway frontage along that utility easement, provided they can work it out with the utility. Obviously, with the electric lines going through there are limitations in terms of heights of trees and bushes and so forth, but they're willing to work with the utility to try to make that happen. There's also a floodplain area on the property that will also be preserved as natural, and then they will provide, even though it says 25 feet, that's 25 feet on average for the rest of the property. There will be areas, hopefully, where that will be a little bit wider, maybe 30 feet wide. And so that altogether, and behind it is actually land that's designated for a park. So altogether, I think this is a good project, and I think it should move forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Cox. And just to clarify, the Parkway frontage per se under the code wouldn't apply to the utility area, but we will work with the utility company to do as much as we can to approximate that planting standard in that location.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Cox?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated April 5th, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and the effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Seconded by Councilmember Branch. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have rezoning Z6121, 316 West Edenton Street. This is a request to rezone just over an acre from DX20 with an urban general frontage to DX40 with that same frontage and some conditions. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the future land use map, and the urban form map, and the Planning Commission recommends approval. So this is just south of the Quorum Center, north of the Holiday Inn, east of St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal.
Bynum, could you speak into the
I'm so sorry.
Microphone?
Yes,
a little
ma'am.
more?
I'd be
Thank
happy
you.
to. Thanks for letting me know. So this is just south of the Quorum Center and north of the Holiday Inn, so north of where we are tonight. There are a number of conditions here. They have prohibited some uses, provided some screening for structured parking, and some also screening for lighting in the structured parking. They have provided for a bike share and also indoor bike storage room. If the facility is larger than 300,000 square feet, they have prohibited the nightclub use
And they have also provided for a public art installation prior to their certificate of occupancy. So the residential density here is going to increase significantly. The maximum number of units increases. The office entitlement also would go up, as would the retail square footage that would be allowed. Again, consistent with the future land use map, consistent with the urban form map. Number of consistent policies here. No inconsistent policies were identified, and the Planning Commission did recommend approval. I know you have applicant and also I believe some others to speak in opposition signed up. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Okay, any questions for Bynum? Okay, we're good. I will open the public hearing then. We have the applicant here, but also 3 people have signed up to speak in opposition. So 8 minutes per side. We will start with the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Worth Mills, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302, with Longleaf Law Partners on behalf of the property owner and the applicant. Let's see, a little rusty. There we go. All right. So this rezoning from DX20 Urban General to DX40 Urban General Conditional Use, as Bynum mentioned, is consistent with the future land use map, urban form map, 2030 comprehensive plan, and every applicable policy that planning staff has identified. It furthers the goals of the equitable development around transit policies to, again, locate intense development near Raleigh's bus routes and Union Station. And while this request is wholly consistent with the city's land use policies, we are requesting that council action be deferred to the May 3rd hearing and the public hearing be left open so that we can explore zoning conditions that address building massing along North Harrington Street to mitigate impacts to the St. Paul AME Church, which is across North Harrington Street and is a local and national landmark. Again, the property here is outlined in red with the Quorum Center just to our north. The Holiday Inn is across Edenton Street to our south. And the 400H building, which is proposed for 20 stories, is projected to be completed in the fall of 2023. We think that 40 stories here is appropriate given the surrounding high-rise buildings that exist now or are to be built in the near future. This slide shows the current zoning of the property. Zoning on this block zoned between 20 and 5 acres today. There was some discussion at Planning Commission regarding whether 40 stories was appropriate at this site. This is the downtown transition area map. Those areas in blue are where the city recommends that heights taper to those existing older single-family neighborhoods. As you can see on the right-hand side, this property is well within the downtown area and outside of those transition areas. And so we believe that 40 stories, again, is appropriate in this location. And conversely, the property is within the core of the city's downtown of the urban form map, where intense redevelopment and walkability is desired. 40-story rezoning with urban general frontage furthers both of those goals. Table LU2 of the 2030 comprehensive plan creates a height range dependent on a property's future land use map designation and urban form map designation. Because we are in the central business district and we are within the core transit area, again, 40 stories is appropriate given the comprehensive plan. And not to mention that this property is within as transit-rich of a location as any within the city of Raleigh. There are 3 Go Raleigh bus routes and a Go Triangle bus route that are in front of this site, and many more within walking distance only a couple of blocks away. The property is a 10-minute walk to Raleigh Union Station and a 15-minute walk to Go Raleigh Station. Given the existing bus routes, given the emphasis on locating density near transit, we think that, again, a rezoning to 40 stories for an intense development here will shift that reliance away from automobiles and towards the existing transit within the city of Raleigh. And again, this is a list of the rezoning conditions before you today. Conditions 1 and 5 include prohibited uses, some of which the quorum center residents desired we remove from those that would otherwise be allowed under the UDO. We have included a parking deck screening and light mitigation condition for conditions 2 and 3, a bike share station condition for condition 4, and a public art installation condition for number 6. And as I mentioned, we are continuing to work with the St. Paul AME Church to address building massing along North Harrington Street. Again, we wish to defer council action, keep the public hearing open until May 3rd so that we can continue that work, but happy to receive any feedback from council this evening so that we can work on that as well in the interim. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilmember Cox, then Councilmember Knight.
In addition to working on the massing of the building with the church, what about setbacks? I'm looking at a map, and I'm looking at 400, I guess it's Hillsboro Street, which is actually directly across the street from the church across West Edenton. And that building has considerable setbacks from Edenton. So I guess I would recommend that in addition to the massing, that you also take into consideration setbacks in order to disrupt the church as little as possible.
Thank you.
Councilmember Knight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just request that you work with all your neighbors as you continue to work on this project. I know there's a lot of interest from the neighbors and the quorum, as well as the neighbors or owners and the neighbors and the churchgoers on Edenton Street as well. So I would just request and ask you to work with all your neighbors as you continue to work on this project.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have one question. Who are you representing in this case? Who are the
property owner and the rezoning applicant, one and the same, 316 West Edenton LLC.
And who makes that up?
That is Brian Kane and Tyson Strutzenberg with Trinity Capital Advisors.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, you have 3 minutes remaining in case you want to come back up and speak after the opposition speaks. So thank you, Worth. First, we have 3 people who have signed up, Pat Chrisman, Ben Kuhn, and Greg Moore. Please decide who's going to speak first. And you have 8 minutes total.
Good evening. My name is Pat Chrisman. I live at 4307 Edgehill Court. I'm here tonight representing Edenton St United Methodist Church. I'm the chair of the trustees of the church, and we do have some concerns about this rezoning. I know we heard from staff and also from the applicant that the plan is consistent. The development is consistent with your policies and plans, but we disagree with that. We have looked at that information, and we feel like 40 stories is not appropriate at this location. The city itself recently rezoned this area for 20 stories in 2016, and we do think 20 stories is more appropriate on Edenton Street, which is not an axial street or a major street like Hillsboro Street is, and the surrounding rezonings that have recently occurred are in the 20-story height limit. So we are here representing Edenton Street. Also here with me is Greg Moore, who's also signed up. He is our senior pastor, and I'll defer to others because they have more detailed information that they can share with you. But thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Greg Moore, I'm the senior pastor of Edenton Street at 228 West Edenton Street. We actually are property contiguous right on the other side from St. Paul's AME. If you see the map, there's St. Paul's and then the property in question, and then we have the next property right next to that, which is currently being utilized as a parking lot. As Ms. Chrisman said, some of our questions are about whether or not this is in the scope of the larger plans for the development of the city of Raleigh, whether a doubling of the original plan is actually helpful to the overall development of that area. Do we have the systems in place and the roads in place and the services in place to serve that that density change? So we have real concerns about that. We also have concerns about the impact that it will have on our sister church, St. Paul AME, and as both a pillar in this community and in the national community, we'd like, again, further dialogue about the development scope before we can approve this and go forward with it. So I would be in favor of deferring this until the next May 3rd meeting as well. I would request that we get to be conversation partners with the developer as well, as we are certainly neighbors and would be impacted by this development overall. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Ben Kuhn.
If someone could cue my presentation, please. Thank you. My name is Ben Kuhn, 2840 Plaza Place, Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm here on behalf of the Quorum Center Residents Advisory Board. This is a significant rezoning case with really precedent-setting status and policy implications for the entirety of the downtown business district. This comes with the most intense zoning classifications at 40 stories, and the city has seen to put care into determining where location-wise those types of maximum density and zoning should go. There is nothing inherently wrong with 40-story zoning heights in location where the comprehensive plan policies state that such intensity and development should be placed. But it's all about the location of where those locations are. And your comprehensive plan talks to this in policy DT 1-16 that discusses high density development. This is not really what that issue is, but it basically says locating the highest density development should be along axial streets, Fayetteville Street, Hillsboro Street, and New Bern Avenue. Major 4-lane streets at and adjacent to the squares and in close proximity to planned transit station. And of course, I think there's another one that's been adopted generally is basically at gateway entrances into the downtown area. 316 West Edenton, the property in question here, is not on an axial street. It is not on a major street. Edenton Street in this area has a width of 65 to 66 feet. A major street cross sections in the street plan have a width, right-of-way width of 104 feet. If it's going to be a BRT corridor, those corridor widths are looking to be increased to 144 feet. So the width in this area is not there. You have in the central business district, it says clearly that heights in the downtown could reach as high as 40 stories, but would taper down to meet the adjacent neighborhoods at a height of 3 to 4 stories. So when you look at this, there is a concept that's baked into a range of densities and intensity applies. You'll hear that it may be between 3 and 40 stories. That doesn't mean it has to be 40 stories. There are locational criteria that have to be considered, one of which that is highly relevant to this case and is cited nowhere as a policy, whether consistent or inconsistent in any analysis of this, is this one. Policy UD 8.2, transit area transitions. We talked and heard about the transit areas and transit and everything about this site. The transition of use, there should be a transition of use intensity to scale from the higher density transit corridors to adjacent neighborhoods, and developments of greater bulk and height should be immediately surrounding transit stations. As distance from such stations increases, development should taper down in bulk and height in order to balance the needs of transit supportive density with established neighborhood character. I'm not going to get into the maps here. I don't have time for it. This is the Equitable Transit-Oriented Development Guidebook, something that y'all adopted or that was created in July of 2020. And it is a study process, a planning framework, a guide for future growth around transit with a focus on equity and affordability, directing growth in and around BRT corridors, and ensuring the benefits of transit are shared broadly and equitably. Here is crux of the policy, the primary policy in this one is to concentrate density around transit. Again, it's talking about the transitioning and tapering down away from transit stations. And that's basically what this says. This was developed in 2020. This is taking off that map. This is a busy map, but what it basically shows you is the transit stations here. You have one at Blunt and Edenton, which will be the first BRT station coming out of downtown along Newbern, and or actually Edenton. That one is 0.45 miles away from the property in question. The Russ bus station, Raleigh Union Station, is 0.42 miles away, and the main bus terminal is 0.61 miles away. It's not directly adjacent to a transit station. It's not. It's 0.42, 0.45, and 0.61 miles away. This is just basically a rendering of showing what 40 stories could potentially look like at this location in an area that's not directly next to transit. And this is a map showing further this outline. The green over here is the property in question. Right there, that's the property in question. The Raleigh Union Station is 0.42 miles away. The closest station here is the Edenton Blunt BRT station that doesn't exist yet but is planned. That's 0.45 miles away. And then the main bus terminal is 0.61 miles away. These are not on actual streets, not directly adjacent to a transit station, and that's not what the policies tell you you should be doing, is putting 40 stories in a 20-story zoning district that has 20, 7, 5, and 12 zoning all around it, because it tapers away from the transit station. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have any questions or comments? Councilmember Cox, then Branch.
I think Mr. Kuhn raises some interesting points about consistency versus inconsistency, and I just want to, ask staff to revisit, and because, how can staff on the one hand come back and say this thing is completely consistent with the comprehensive plan, and clearly Mr. Kuhn makes an excellent argument that it is not consistent with the comprehensive plan in many aspects. So I'd like to at least see, as a side project, some resolution to those inconsistencies in these arguments.
Councilmember Branch.
I've had the pleasure of talking to both sides about this case. I'm a sitting councilor, Women's Forts District, and I know she's met with them as well. And I just want to say, take this time to really work together on this project. Please look at the impacts to the churches and traffic as we move forward, because 40 stories is a lot. There's a lot of property around there that's recently been rezoned at 20 stories already. So that has kind of been the trend, I guess you could say, in a way. But at the same time, a lot has changed since those rezoning cases in Raleigh overall. So please work together. And I look forward to continuing conversations and supporting the district council person.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I do have one comment. I walk through that neighborhood often. Walked there this morning on my way to the municipal building. I don't agree with the assessment on the transit piece. The whole idea is to be within walkable distances to train stations, bus stations, whatnot. This clearly is within walking distance. What I have a real problem with is, and just causes a lot of unease, is the proximity of the churches and the historic value of one of the churches. It's on the historic register. And to not have any conditions addressing that, I could not support this rezoning as it is. So you have work to do. And I would suggest to the applicants that they take a serious look at what they're doing and what they're proposing, and urge you all to work together. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to leave this open, and we will reconvene on this matter May 3rd. And let me ask the applicant, do you think that's enough time?
Yes, ma'am. I think that's a good starting point, and if we think that we need more time, we will let council know as quickly as possible whether we need to extend that public hearing date or whether May 3rd continues to work. But
Okay.
we hear you, and we'll get to work.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next we have rezoning Z6821, 1624 Glenwood Avenue. We do have people speaking in opposition on this case. So, Bynum, if you will present.
Yes, ma'am. I did just want to follow up on Mr. Cox's comment and say that we will take a look at consistency and revisit that at his request. So this is a request to rezone a portion of 1624 Glenwood Avenue. It's 0.2 acres, and the request is to remove the urban general frontage. And it's inconsistent with the future land use map, but it's already inconsistent with the future land use map. Base district isn't changing here. The Planning Commission recommends approval, and the Historic Development Commission also votes to recommend approval. So the area that's outlined in black here is a portion of the site. The parcel continues south of that black boundary in the red area all the way out to Glenwood Avenue. And I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So in this, y'all can see if I actually draw, right? So this is the entirety of the parcel, and so they're just rezoning that portion. It's great to be able to draw for you again. That's nice to have that back. So a couple of views of the site from Fairview Road. And so what are they saying? They're saying no more than one building on this particular portion of the parcel. They're prohibiting some uses. They're prohibiting drive-through use. And then they're keeping some of these are old conditions. They're keeping the dumpster screening and specifying height there. So the residential density is going down. The office entitlement stays steady, and the retail entitlement goes up. It is inconsistent with the neighborhood mixed use designation on the future land use map, but that's true of the existing base district in the zoning. There's no frontage offered here, so it's inconsistent with the urban form map. This is a core transit area and also a mixed use center on just past the end of a Main Street designation. But really, that's why they're pursuing the rezoning is to remove that frontage. So consistent with some policies, inconsistent with a couple others. Planning Commission finds that recommends approval, as does the RHDC, and I'm happy to answer questions if you like. I know there's been a lot of discussion about this case around fire access for the parcel adjacent to the portion of this parcel that's being rezoned. We have folks from our fire review team. I'm also happy to take a pass at that if you would like. But happy to answer questions in advance of opening the public hearing if that's helpful. Mr. Cox.
Could you just explain briefly urban general and what that implies?
So the urban general frontage is I'm not sure. You want to know the details of the urban general frontage?
Yes. What are the details of urban general?
Typically, right. So typically prohibits building parking between the building and the street. Keeps the building very close. Requires a very small setback. Requires a pretty significant build to. So urban limited has a lighter build to than urban general. Urban general, I think, is a little bit lighter than shop front. If you think of our frontages in relationship to each other. Also requires pedestrian entrance on the to the public right of way versus like into a parking lot. I'm trying to think about what else. I think the build to and the setback are probably the most significant. So requiring a significant portion of the facade of the building to occupy the frontage on the public right-of-way. And I believe that's really the concern for the applicant here, is that the build-to would require, I believe, more than a 50% presence in that frontage on the right-of-way. So I think they're looking for some relief from that. The applicant could speak to that, kind of what why they're pursuing what they are a little bit better than I could.
Right, I would like to hear that. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Did you say you had somebody here from fire?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to hear an explanation as to what is going on. It's very confusing to me.
Sure. I will say the property adjacent to this parcel, and I made that point about the entirety of the parcels not being rezoned. So the parcel south of that, my understanding is they are looking for access, and that could not be achieved through this zoning case alone because the entirety of the parcel is not being rezoned. And I'm going to let, I know Ryan Cutright's here. I've talked to him like 6 times to make sure he'd be here. But I think they have some other options about how they could address that issue. But my understanding is that that would be very difficult would not be something we could resolve directly and completely through the rezoning case.
I'd ask that the map be left up because it's confusing. It gets less confusing if you can see a map of it. Could we? Thank you.
Sure. I think it's easiest to see in this aerial view. And again, so this is roughly the entirety of the parcel, and they're just rezoning that yellow portion. And the access question is for this parcel down here.
Madam Mayor, what kind of questions do you have?
I'm sorry, what?
What kind of questions do you have in regards to the fire access?
I need an explanation from you all on what's going on and what your concerns are.
Okay, so 1622 Glenwood Avenue, which is shown or outlined in pink, pulled a permit to replace deck boards and replace deck boards only. They proceeded to build an addition of 500 square feet on what is shown right here. When they were caught or noticed from the building inspector who was, I guess, doing their inspection for the deck permit, they put a stop work order on the property until they could get proper permits for the addition. Once the site plan and building plans were submitted to the city, we noticed that they did not meet the current requirements of the fire code, and they had options to meet those requirements, either get a cross-access agreement with a neighboring property so they can meet fire access from Fairview Road, or install a sprinkler system for their property, which would meet the code requirements.
Does fire access also apply to the Rialto?
The Rialto is not in for permits, so we only look at fire access in regards to the submittal's property. We can't require another adjacent property owner to meet the requirements for somebody else. I would say the building 1622 met current code requirements before they built the addition. In regards to the other properties that are there, I don't know if they have any cross-access agreements with any other property owners, so I can't speak to the Rialto or anyone else.
So, well, there was an alley that used to exist there, which I guess was what was used for fire access, and that alley no longer exists or was closed when Underwood was expanded. That was my understanding. What is your understanding of that?
There currently is a 10-foot cross-access easement that runs between where the pink and the green, that before the addition was built actually met the code requirements of being within 150 feet of all portions of the building to the fire access road surface. So that is still there. The sprinkler system would increase that distance to 250 feet. So it met code before the addition was built without permits. I guess the problem is now trying to get a building or an addition that was built without permits into code compliance.
And are permits now being issued?
We're still in the review process. The site plan and the building plans are requiring to be resubmitted until the design can meet the current code requirements.
Okay. Any other questions right now?
Just to clarify, when you're talking about the alley, so along the where the school is, right?
Yeah.
That did not, y'all have talked to the school, the school system, school administration, and that we can't get access across, can't get access across there?
Currently there is a fence that blocks access and an additional unpermitted storage unit that has been placed on the back of the property. So they could seek a cross-access agreement with the school system in order to prevent any future building that would block fire access. So that's kind of why we're asking for, you could get a cross-access agreement across any of the neighboring properties that would prevent any future construction that would stop fire department access. Because right now the fire department could come across this property at 1624, but 1624 could build a building there, and we would no longer have access to 1622.
And the cross-access agreement would have to be, can I speak?
Yes.
Thank you. The cross-access agreement would have to be a permanent agreement?
It could. Yes, it would have to be permanent. It could not be a temporary agreement just to get permits and then remove that access.
But could it have a time, what's the word, not time-sensitive, a 5-year agreement?
No, because from our standpoint, that would put you in the same issue of, it doesn't matter if you would remove that cross-access 5 days after the permits have been issued or 5 years. Once that cross-access is removed, there's nothing preventing a building on that lot or within that cross-access. And if they would remove, let's say they got a cross-access across 1624 that was 5 feet wide, and then 5 years from now it gets removed, 1624 could build a building right over top of that, and 1622's addition would no longer meet the code requirements.
It seems like at that point, then they would have to find a way to meet it. But I guess you're saying you may not know that, and so it seemed like there's a way to get to it where you could do it into place. And if there is a building built, then figure out another way at that time. My understanding is they're not planning on building anything right now, so you could do something that in the future, if that changes, then their access agreement would change and they'd have to do something different at that point. But
well, and the reason we do that is because at this point, typically, if you apply for permits before you build the building, it's a lot easier to install systems such as a sprinkler system that would require, in this case, to meet the code. So
I just hope y'all keep working on this to try to figure it out. I know that's different than their rezone, but it is important to, I think, the neighbors there to try to figure this out. But I hear where you are.
Don't leave. Okay, I will open the hearing, and we'll have 8 minutes per side. First, we'll hear from Isabel Maddox.
Good evening, members of the council, Madam Mayor. Isabel Maddox here, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh, 27602. I'm here on behalf of Frank Winslow and Cecilia Winslow, brother and sister owner of this property, and they own the entity 5 Winds LLC, which is the property owner. Is my presentation available here? I haven't done this in a while, so. Okay, but okay, he's gonna put me up. Okay, this case, just to understand how we got here, this case, my clients did operate a restaurant there since 2004. In 2013, they actually acquired the property. And then they got all the proper permits. At no time did the specter of these conditions come up. There were conditions from 1997 that had been hiding somewhere in the city. Only when they closed the Point restaurant, which some of y'all may know, in, I think, 2020, and leased the property to the loan rider. And when you do that, you have to have the health department came in and took a look, and they said, well, get a zoning check from the city, and these zoning conditions appeared, which required office uses in this location, didn't allow dumpsters, all sorts of things that have never been followed and never understood by the city or my clients. So, they came to me and said, what can we do? I said, I think we have to rezone. And that's what the city staff had told them. We thought just a cleanup case. And there were a couple of issues, the inconsistency with the future land use map, and as Bynum indicated, that was really a function of the 2009 neighborhood mixed use was imposed, and when the citywide rezoning came in, rezoned to CX to accommodate longtime bars, restaurants, fuel stations there. And so that was an immediate inconsistency. And I also have a slide on the frontage, which I'll get to in a minute. But just here's your, we're just zoning the part circled in black. And here's a very colorful slide that shows you we're zoning the piece in green. That's the only property that the 97 conditions apply to. Therefore, that's the only thing this case applies to. The rest of the parcel includes the whole Lone Rider building, which is circled in blue. And then you can see the 10-foot alley, which has a yellow stripe down it. And then to the south of that, you have the red is the Churchill's building. And that little striped area is the addition. And so they could get a fire hose from a fire truck, come down the 10-foot alley, and get to the back of their building before this addition was added. Unfortunately, had they come in advance, they would have discovered this and either dealt with it or decided to maybe make the addition a little bit shorter. I don't think it's a huge amount. So I think they could either reduce the size of their building, remove it, and get back to fire compliance. Also, they could sprinkler it. I don't think this case can solve the problem because, we could put a condition across the parcel, but it wouldn't get all the way there. And, to try to impose an easement on my client's property, this is Frank and Cecilia Winslow's, it's their retirement, and this is a per foot type of neighborhood. I mean, if you sell property and you're encumbered by an easement, that costs you money in terms of your property value. And nobody's offered them any compensation for this. It's just something they're not willing to do at this point. They have allowed all the neighbors back here to come and go. Frank Winslow put this ramp and this access point in. You're right, Madam Mayor, that there was an easement sort of around here, or an alley rather, right here, that the city closed maybe 20 years ago when the school was being expanded, and that had been accessed. But he put a ramp in. There was no access on this property. He put it in at his expense and has allowed all the neighbors to come and go and use it, and intends to continue that on a licensed basis, which is not a permanent easement. And so no present plans to do anything, but want to preserve the future value of this property. I want to go to one slide to answer Mr. Cox's question about the frontage, and I'll tell you why. Let me clear that. Okay, what we would, the building we would be required to put along that Fairview frontage would have to be 101 feet, 70% of the frontage. And you see how odd that frontage is with that little finger out there. I've done a lot of these variances for frontage requirements, and this is, to me, is an obvious one you would have to get. It just seems silly to impose a requirement that is not going to be able to be met. So that's why we've requested no frontage here. There still remains frontage along Glenwood on the other piece of this parcel. So the frontage requirement continues to apply on Glenwood. So I really think those two issues are inconsistencies, but they're technicalities, and I think you can understand why they're inconsistent. I think the big issue is the fire access, and I'd like to reserve any remaining time to respond to any opposition. Mr. Cox? Oh.
Councilmember Cox?
Just so a question about the frontage on Fairview then. I mean, would that be parking?
There's parking now once you come in off of Fairview. I don't think it's quite that close, but there's no the frontage requirement would preclude parking between the building and the street.
But you're removing the frontage requirement.
Yeah, but right now, I think our current situation is a legal nonconformity, whereas once we get this rezoning, that changes. That character changes because we've gotten the zoning more recently.
So all I'm trying to get at is that if we remove the urban general frontage, then your applicant could conceivably build parking between the street and the building.
Conceivably. I don't, it's hard to understand, hard to know what building might be built here.
But it's possible to do that because there would be there are no conditions to preclude parking between
That's correct.
the building and the street.
That's correct.
Because the only other option would be to park cars somewhere else on that property or on the street.
Yeah. But right now, there is parking between the existing building on the other part of the parcel and the street. So that parking will continue for the foreseeable future, and that's the concern I have if we included the frontage requirement on this new rezoning.
Okay. Well, I guess my concern would be, I would like to see a condition where parking is prohibited on on that piece between the building and the street on Fairview.
Well, there is parking there now, on this piece. Pardon? No, not on the street, but he's talking about on the parcel. I mean, I don't think we would have an objection to say upon redevelopment.
Upon redevelopment,
there will be no parking between a new building and the Fairview.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see. Yes.
Okay, I don't think we would have a problem with adding that condition.
Okay.
So I'll yield to any opposition.
Madam Mayor, make a point of information. Pat Young with Planning and Development Department. Certainly not opposition, just I wanted to clarify something that Ms. Maddox just said, and she may have additional information. Staff went and investigated the claim that there was an alley at the rear of this on the east side of the property. Based on our research, there has not been a city controlled alley. There's not been public right-of-way. There was not a city street closing. Wake County Public Schools had a access point there, essentially a driveway that operated for many years, and that was removed by Wake County Public Schools when Underwood Elementary was redeveloped about 20 years ago. So I just wanted to make sure there was clarity that it was not a city-initiated action that eliminated that fire access. I think it was used informally and by all these adjacent owners for many years, but was legally redeveloped without any city endorsement.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, now we will hear from Larry Carter and Timothy Kane. If we could set the clock at 8 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, and staff.
I want to be quick with what I have to say because Mr. Carter here is the contractor that is responsible and can speak to the permits aspect of these issues. I've sat here, I've had several points that I wanted to make, but it really comes down to one, and that is the public interest and whether what we're looking for is reasonable. We're not necessarily opposed to the rezoning. We're actually we want to see 5 Points meet its heydays coming into the future. And so what we would like the council to consider is an approval with an asterisk. And what we're looking for is access to the fire hydrant that's right across Fairway or Fairview. And it's right there. If you follow the easternmost line, it almost points a direct, it would hit the fire hydrant. The fire hydrant was designed, it looks, to the placement, to handle the 3 businesses that are south of the subject that we're looking at. And going back to what was said about 5 feet, a 5 feet access located within the required setback that cannot be built in, that could provide access for a hose lay from that fire hydrant to the back of those 3 buildings. And so there's no building that's going to be able to be allowed within that 5 foot setback. It already exists. It will exist as a condition of this rezoning. And what we're looking is hose access. That is it. In 3 of the previous presentations that the staff has made, one comment has repeatedly been made, and that is it reasonable and in the public interest? And we believe that this request is reasonable in the public interest, and based on the fact that the 10-foot existing easement between 1622 and 1624 would not accommodate the new fire engines as they're designed. As a matter of fact, the actual measurement of that 10-foot easement or alleyway is 9 feet 7 inches. And going to Station 6 and measuring the fire engine myself is 9 and 9 inches. And so even if they could fold up part of the truck, the running boards, the mirrors, and everything else, they wouldn't be able to open their doors. And so essentially what we're trying to say, what we're asking the council to do, by all means, approve the rezoning. We believe that it fits everything else that you're looking for. But because of the nature of the businesses, including the Rialto, the 5 feet within that setback would handle what it is we're looking for and answer those public safety issues. Thank you.
Larry Carter.
Mayor, Council, I had a couple of things that I wanted to address. There seems to be an issue that we...
Can we have your address, please, for the record?
I'm sorry?
Your address for the record, please.
I'm sorry. Larry Carter. I'm the general contractor at 1622 Glenwood Avenue. And there was some talk about us not having permits or not being, building a building that was not inspected. So we were issued a deck permit to rebuild deck boards on 1/15 of 2020. And we worked with an inspector throughout that whole process. And when we started tearing that deck apart, we could see that the structural integrity was more than compromised. It was quite dangerous. So we worked with a City of Raleigh inspector, Levin Jones, and he watched us on every part of this deck remodel. We had a roughing inspection on 2/13 of 2020. We had a building final on 3/23 of 2020. We had electrical rough-in on 2/14 of 2020. So I don't understand how the city cannot know what's going on and think that there was a building that was built in the dark overnight when they were inspecting and watching over the whole thing. Into Mr. Cutright saying that the alleyway was sufficient for emergency ingress and egress before we built the space. Well, those are 2 brick buildings there. That space of that alleyway is the same as what it was. There's no encroachment upon it. It's not any more narrow. It is what it is. This was all brought to our attention of not having connectivity and not being able to have access, not only for us, but for 1620 and a half Glenwood Avenue and 1620, which is the Rialto Theater. There's several utilities access that need access to the back of their buildings. The Rialto uses fuel oil to heat their building. Dumpster removal. There's 2 gas mains for not only us, but the Rialto, as well as 1620 and a half Glenwood Avenue for Dominion Energy for gas mains. Same thing for transformers for Duke Energy. The city tried to ask us to get a cross-access agreement. The Winslows are not willing to do that, and I can't necessarily blame them for that. I'm not against their rezoning. I think they should be rezoned. They're good people. They should be able to do what they want with their space, but we should also be able to exist as we want to exist and have a functioning business and have access and connectivity to the back of those buildings. Without it, if in the future there was a building that's built, well, that's gone, unless the city acts and does something and remedies a situation that's both amicable for not only us, but for the Five Winds group. Surely there's got to be some type of compromise, an amicable solution that can be made. Not once, while working with the inspector, Levin Jones, were we told that, you know, you guys might need a different set of permits or a different set of plans. They watched us dig our footings. They watched us build the deck to the current standards of what it's supposed to be, having correct spans and not untreated wood just sitting on dirt. So it looks like we're being penalized for doing the right thing once, I guess, all the zoning issues came up. I don't know what an amicable solution is, but surely there's got to be one. Like I said, we're not opposed to the Five Winds guys being able to rezone and do what they want with their building. That's part of the American way. But then you can't hurt 3 other people by not giving them connectivity and access to the back of their buildings. That's all I have for now, and I'll defer. If there's any other questions you guys would like to ask me, I'm free to answer them.
Any questions?
So what year again did you say you did the decking?
The decking permits were issued, and this has been going on since 2020. The permit was issued on January 15th of 2020. The first rough-in inspection, watching footings and spans, was done February 13th of 2020. Okay. And then the building final inspection was done March 23rd of 2020.
Okay. I would, because no one here is from inspection, to address some of this. So hopefully, I'm thinking we should maybe hold this open to address that part, because I'm one of those where if they did things the right way, then we should address this a certain way. But if you build a building without the right permits, then I don't think we should reward them by stopping another zoning case. So this is just from where I'm understanding these dates and this information to get a better understanding.
So what I think we would suggest is that this is not part of the rezoning, but we move forward with the rezoning because it's separate issues, but then direct the fire department to work with them to come up with some solutions. There's got to be solutions to this.
Yes, ma'am, I agree with that as well.
Fair. That sounds good too.
Okay. Councilmember Knight.
Okay. Can I ask a question? I guess Ms. Walter would be the best one to answer. Is on this rezone, will there be a setback required on the east and northeast side or not? You know, they're talking about a 5-foot setback, and then I thought there was the 0 setback with the rezone.
Yes, sir. I was actually just looking at that after the 1622 owner brought that up. So the way the code is written, in the CX district, there's a 5-foot setback from the primary street, which I believe in this instance would be Fairview Road if something were built here, and then 5 foot from the side street. So whether Fairview is primary or side, there'd be a 5-foot setback from the street. And then the side lot line and the rear lot line is a 0 or 6-foot setback. My understanding is that you can build on the property line if there's not somebody on the property line. I'm kind of looking at Robin, already on the property line adjacent to you. So But there's no required setback there of 6 feet.
This is between the school and the property.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So
So
you're
they
saying
could build on the
there is
property.
a zero setback there.
Yes, sir. I believe they could build on the property line there.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Young, you have anything
Mr.
to add?
Young?
Yeah, if I might, Council, again, Pat Young with Planning and Development. Our department does have the inspections, building inspections portfolio. I can't speak to the specific claims against Mr. Jones, the inspector that was referred. This is the first we're hearing about that concern. What I can say is I've reviewed the case material very carefully, personally, and the scope of the construction at the rear of the reference building exceeded the initial permit requirement that was referenced, which was for deck. Now, they are currently, as was mentioned by Ryan Cutright, they are currently in review for a full compliant permit. But the permit that was filed, the construction ultimately completed, exceeded that scope. So
I have the timeline if that's helpful.
Okay, do we have any additional questions? Councilmember Cox?
Yes, there was mention about rear access to the other buildings such as the Rialto. I mean, how is that going to work in the future? I mean, where is that access? Like we were talking about dumpsters that have to be emptied at the rear of the Rialto, as well as utilities. And so how does a dump truck get back there today?
As a practical matter, they probably come through this access point, but they don't necessarily have a legal easement to do that. And I don't think it's, if the city decides that this access is necessary, they have the power of condemnation and for fair value. Mm-hmm. And so, as I said, we don't have any present plans to redevelop, but I think if this is something that is deemed to be critical to the city, that's, to me, the right path, as opposed to requiring this in the zoning. And again, the zoning only covers, a part of this track, so it doesn't get you there. If you get back to here, we could that could be a zoning condition right there, but it doesn't get you all the way to there or here. So I don't think it gets fixed in the context of this zoning. We certainly are willing to sit down and talk with everybody about creative solutions, but with a zero setback situation, there's not a 5-foot setback that's definitely going to be.
Well, let me ask what I call a chicken and egg question.
Okay.
So let's say we rezone this, and the applicant wants to go ahead and build. Will they be able to build, or do we have to resolve these access issues first before they can build? And I guess that's a question for staff.
Under the development code, there's not a requirement that a fire access be provided in this situation.
Well, what about the other accesses, like the access for the Rialto for their dumpsters, for example?
I don't know if the Rialto has dumpsters back there. I know there are several dumpsters back there, probably serving the Churchills and maybe Proof. But what? And I'm sorry for the misinformation on this alley along the school. That's what I was told. I think there was a practical access back there that was closed, and that's how the dumpster service trucks got back. The city, I was told, again, agreed that they would send a smaller truck to come down this 10-foot alley, but that didn't work well because we had restaurants and bars, and they were coming apparently once every couple of weeks, and it got kind of nasty. And that's why my client put in the ramp off of Fairview.
Okay, so I guess my question isn't for you then. My question then would be for staff, is, and even if something is built under the current zoning, and this is a side issue, how does that impact access for a business such as the Rialto?
My understanding is that, I don't know the actual logistics of how the Rialto is operating, but and I don't think you can see it in this photo, but the Rialto actually has access to their rear area from the south. It may be that they are using cross-access from their neighbor to the south to access that property. I don't know. I think your question about, I heard you ask, could 1622 build without the fire access? My understanding is they could build if they sprinkled the building, and that they wouldn't have to have the access easement if they paid to sprinkle their building.
Well, I understand that, but my question was, which comes first? Do they have to sprinkle the building before the other building is built, or that's a separate issue? I mean, if the other building goes up and access is blocked,
Right.
then
So
in
for
this
new,
narrow building that's next door, I mean, did they effectively get shut down until they add sprinklers?
so for their new construction to be permitted, they either need long-lasting access easement that doesn't expire so that the building could be expected to be in compliance for its life, or they need to sprinkle the building. Right, so
Okay.
sprinkling the building could satisfy the permitting requirements, as I
Mhm.
understand it.
But there's no linkage between that and this developer, this applicant, going ahead with construction.
As I understand it, no.
Okay.
Councilmember Knight?
Madam Mayor, just one point of clarification. The blue square is not being rezoned, sorry.
That is correct.
And so this cannot be solved. This, don't scratch your head. This access question for any of this cannot be solved by stopping the rezoning or elsewhere. So my thought, if the council supports this, is to move forward with the rezone and continue to work on this very important access issue for the rest of those buildings with all the interested parties involved to continue to talk about this, including obviously the fire department is a major part of that. Is that something that the council
So
would support?
I think we are there. I would suggest, first off, if there are any other questions. If not, I'm going to close the hearing. Councilmember Knight?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated April 5, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, I have a second motion that I would like to make. This is directing the fire department to work, and planning to work with all members of this area. This is an important part of 5 Points. We've got to come up with some solutions that work, and I want us to be solutions focused and not just, well, here's a problem. Find the solutions, let's get this done. That's my motion. Do you have a
Second.
second? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, here we go. Councilmember Branch, you want me to wait? Okay. All right, next we have CP 221, the Capital North Corridor Plan, A Future of Choice. No one has signed up in support, and Dwight Otwell has signed up in opposition. So we'll hear from staff first.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm John Anagnos from the Planning and Development Department. I do want to note before I get started that I do believe there are a couple folks here who want to speak in opposition who did not sign up, and so I would like to advocate that they be allowed to speak. But if we have the presentation pulled up. There we go.
Could you say again what you had said about others had signed up?
I believe there's a couple people here who would like to speak in opposition who did not sign up. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. This process has been going on for about 3 years, so I think it would be nice to them.
Let's hear the report
Yes.
first, please.
Okay. So I'm going to go into where this plan came from, and then what we heard from the community, and then what is actually in the plan. So the Capital North Corridor Plan deals with a section of Capitol Boulevard between I-440 and I-540. It's about 4.5 miles, and it's all of it is a portion of U.S. Highway 1, and a portion of it is U.S. Highway 401. And it serves anywhere from 50 to 70,000 cars a day, depending on what part of it you're on. So in the community engagement portion of this process, we did have a number of large public meetings, and then community events, pop-up events at several locations, as well as canvassing. And from that interaction with the community, the number one issue that we heard was that there needs to be relief for traffic congestion. The number two issue that we heard was that the appearance of the corridor was not satisfactory. And then additionally, that pedestrian safety was a high priority. So we developed some vision themes to guide this plan and the recommendations that ended up in it at the end. And so basically emphasizing all modes of transportation as well as land use and development to improve the consistency of the appearance of the area. And so that takes the form of a number of recommendations organized into these categories: community investments, the conversion of Capitol Boulevard to a multi-way boulevard, and then land development recommendations for 4 areas along Capitol Boulevard, and finally how those things are actually implemented. So the core recommendation of this quarter plan is to rebuild Capitol Boulevard in this area between 440 and 540 as what's called a multi-way boulevard. That means substantially widening the right-of-way of Capitol Boulevard in some locations by as much as 25 feet on each side. That is going to be impactful to private property and small businesses along this corridor. And so with that in mind, we have proposed a series of action items within the plan to help stabilize the communities around this corridor, particularly small businesses that are likely to be impacted both by the construction of the multi-way boulevard as well as by changes in access and travel patterns once it is constructed. And so those recommendations are basically to assist with the formation of a small business alliance and to provide grants to assist businesses to remain open and active during those disruptions. So and the timing of those recommendations is also specified very clearly, that those investments in the community should occur prior to the transportation project. And so this is the recommended transportation project, which is that Capitol Boulevard would have a set of local lanes on the outside that provide access to local businesses and neighborhoods, and a set of regional lanes towards the center that basically travel from 540 to 440 with no traffic signals. And then finally a set of lanes in the interior for dedicated bus lanes, potentially for bus rapid transit, though the northern corridor for bus rapid transit has not been finalized. The way that you manage to have separate lanes for different styles of travel within the corridor is that you have to convert the intersections into interchanges, essentially bridges where cross streets would pass over or under Capitol Boulevard. So that means the intersections would also take up significantly more right-of-way than they currently do. There are benefits to the interchanges, though. They can provide shorter crossing distances and larger waiting refuges for pedestrians. They can also be the locations where bus rapid transit stations are installed. So essentially a pedestrian would only have to cross half of Capitol Boulevard's width in order to reach a bus rapid transit station if it's constructed within the interchange. They are also recommended to have separated protected bicycle facilities on the cross streets. So this is an example of what that could look like at New Hope Church Road and Buffalo Road. This is one of the more unique forms of interchange that we're proposing, which is called a single point urban interchange. And this one is basically special because there's a lot of east-west traffic at this location. But this is a general idea. A compact interchange at each of the existing intersections that reduces impacts on nearby private property and maintains as much as possible the square shape of the corner of the two streets. So we have been sharing this information with the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization and North Carolina Department of Transportation, and CAMPO is interested in submitting this for a funding round that would be set in 2026 to 2027, called SPOT 6.0, and could potentially assign funding for a portion of this project as soon as that period. And that would lead to potential construction as soon as the early 2030s. Now, of course, that's assuming all goes well with those mechanisms. So that's the street construction project for Capitol Boulevard. So in addition to that, we are proposing that there be 4 nodes along this section of Capitol Boulevard where land use policies support denser mixed-use development and multimodal transportation, particularly bicycle and pedestrian access. And so that takes the form of height and use recommendations, also priority bicycle facilities, in those areas, and largely through proposing new streets on the street plan. And it's those new streets that we're proposing on the street plan where we have heard the most comments in response to this corridor plan. Those new streets, in addition to providing additional capacity around Capitol Boulevard to serve local trips instead of people having to use Capitol Boulevard itself, also are locations where the city can place bicycle facilities, protected bicycle lanes. So that's an important part of the planning process, is that the proposed streets in the street plan enable additional bicycle connections that don't use Capitol Boulevard itself. We have decided to delay the recommendations of the land use and height until after the transportation project is farther along and the community investments have been made, essentially trying to deter large-scale redevelopment in areas where we know that there is a high amount of naturally occurring affordable housing, so not trying to encourage displacement until there has been time for community stabilization investments. Again, I mentioned the priority bicycle lanes that can take the form of either new proposed streets in the street plan as well as existing streets in surrounding neighborhoods. So we have received a number of comments from property owners who objected to some of the street plan proposals. I'm going to be very brief with these. We'll leave it to those property owners if they are here to be able to speak to those. But basically questions about would a new public street conflict with existing streets nearby? Would it encourage cut-through traffic? We think that's actually a benefit in the sense of providing additional ways of getting around without traveling on Capitol Boulevard, especially for bicycles. And then the issues, the concerns you've heard about the street plan recently related to impacts on existing shopping centers. And so I do want to stress that the nature of the street plan is that when a proposed street is placed on the street plan, that does not mean that the city intends to condemn or purchase that property and construct that street against the will of the property owner. What it means is that that if the property owner chooses to redevelop their property, the redevelopment plan for their property, the site plan that they submit, would need to show how they are going to achieve that new public street connection. So in this example with the southern half of the Terry Moore Square Shopping Center, this street would be constructed if the owner of the shopping center decided to redevelop for some different type of development. This is a similar situation at Huntley, the Shops at Capitol Shopping Center, and then other properties in similar scenarios with similar concerns. So I have these slides for reference if you'd like to look at these maps, if you hear comments from the public and would like to take a closer look. I won't belabor them. And then also I'd like to mention that we did hear comments from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. I know Chair Otwell from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission is here tonight to speak in opposition. And basically that opposition is related, number one, to the overall intent of this corridor plan, which is to widen and expand traffic capacity, vehicular traffic capacity on Capitol Boulevard, but also because of the proposed removal of the separated bikeway from Capitol Boulevard itself, because we're proposing a 12-foot sidewalk in its place. And that is, we agree, staff agrees, that is not to the full spirit and intent of the separated bikeway facility designation on the bike plan. But we believe that due to the right-of-way constraints and the other multimodal benefits of the multi-way boulevard, that a 12-foot sidewalk is an appropriate facility. We offered some alternatives to BPAC at a recent meeting, and we discussed a new policy that could be added if the council wishes to specify that the 12-foot sidewalk that is proposed would have a particular portion of it that is distinguished as being for wheeled vehicles, including bicycles and wheelchairs. So that's all I have for the presentation. I'm happy to take your questions, and you have options for how you can respond to this item. Thank you.
Do we have questions at this time? Councilmember Branch?
Yeah, thinking about the bikeway and going back to what we saw on the transit trip in Florida, and I think Director Michael Moore was there, and I know this was prepared before we went, but the way they utilized and delineated bike lanes and walking paths. I'm thinking about the overpass underneath it. I think
The underline.
the underline, yeah. I think with the underline, I think if we can, I'm willing to take this and hold in committee to give staff a chance to look at that and see how it may be able to incorporate some of what we've learned into the bike part of the project.
Did you just say you were willing to take this into committee?
Yes, I did, and I give them time so it wouldn't be until May.
Awesome.
So.
Okay. All right, we're going to continue the public hearing portion of this.
We could discuss more in committee. I just responded that quickly that I believe in the context of, I did watch the news item about that trip, and it appeared that that was a fully decked highway where there was a continuous area underneath it. And I believe that the way that this multi-way boulevard would be constructed would not have a continuous area under a deck, but we can discuss more.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the whole idea is for us to look at this in a more creative way. Mm-hmm. All right, so as I said, nobody has signed up to speak in support. We have Mr. Otwell who has signed up to speak.
All right, good evening. My name is Dwight Otwell. I'm the current chair of the Raleigh Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission. I live at 5215 Coronado Drive, 27609. The BPAC has been paying close attention to the development of this plan over the past couple years, and we have indeed received several presentations from Mr. Anagnost, and we appreciate the attention to detail that staff has given to this work and the interaction that we've had, and they're trying to do their best with implementing what we feel is a flawed vision for the city. This is a project that will turn Capitol Boulevard into a freeway, and we feel that a freeway is going to move us in the wrong direction. So we've been working with Oaks and Spokes and Wake Up Wake County. We have penned a letter. We have delivered that to council and we've given it to staff. And so I won't read the letter here. I won't belabor your time, but the gist of it is that this is going to bring more cars into the city and induce more traffic. Regardless of the mitigations that occur directly on the corridor, bringing more traffic into the city will be detrimental to mobility and safety for pedestrians citywide and in the corridor. It will double down on the environmental impacts that require all the sprawl that will be induced will cause and the additional cars that will be existing in the city and along this corridor. And it dilutes our investments in transit. Every time we make driving easier, we make transit a less viable option. We feel that if this is an unavoidable path that the city must take and that we have to do this to meet in the middle with NCDOT, we feel it doesn't go far enough and is not bold enough and creative enough in implementing mitigations for the neighborhoods and for pedestrian and bicycle safety. Indeed, the priority bicycle network that will parallel corridor in the plan, the plan admits that we're going to have to come up with creative and innovative ways to implement these bikeways because currently the city does not have implementation strategy to put bikeways on the paths that have been identified, and they would be infeasible politically and engineering-wise. We love to see investments that strengthen our communities. When you build sidewalks, when you make connections, when we strengthen our parks like Dix and Chavis Park and our greenways, it makes our communities stronger and improves the value of life for our residents. And spending money on freeways moves us in the opposite direction. I'd be happy to continue to answer questions, and we look forward to engaging with staff as these projects continue to develop. So,
well, you'll have the opportunity to engage in committee.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that a couple of people wanted to speak. There's 5 minutes left. Who are those folks?
I've been contacted by Kirk Parker. I don't know if he's in the room tonight. Okay. Well, yeah, if there's no one here to speak, I know that I had been contacted by a couple people, but I don't think they signed up. But if they're not here, then there's no need to worry about it.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to close the hearing. We're going to make a motion to send this matter to the Transit and Transportation Committee. You've made that motion, Counselor Branch. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, that was unanimous, Clerk. Thank you. Okay. Next, we have the Wake BRT Western Boulevard Corridor Study and CP 1021 amendments. Before we begin, I just want to say we're going to continue this hearing. The issue came up about Ramadan, and we will continue this to May. But we will hear from people who have signed up for this evening. But before we begin, I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, please.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Dania Sandeep with Planning and Development. So the very last item, again, is the Wake BRT Western Corridor and comp plan amendments. Oh. Hello. Can you hear me now? Okay. Do you want me to repeat? Sure. Okay, sorry. Just going, Tanya Sandeep with Planning and Development, here to speak on Big BRT Western Boulevard Corridor Study and CP 1021. So just want to start off by reminding folks that this was a huge collaborative effort that has been ongoing for 2+ years. So we want to say a huge thank you to all of our partners, both from the community as well as internal partners and several stakeholders, folks who have been engaged in this process all along. And it is our hope that all of the recommendations you see in the report captures some of the priorities that we heard from the community, and also puts forth a vision for transformation of Western into a more safer, walkable, transit-oriented corridor of the future. I do want to take a quick moment. There's been an audience in the public who have been patiently waiting. Thank you so much for being here. Now, before I dive into the presentation, I do want to take a few extra moments because in the last month or so, there has been a lot of confusion, questions, inquiries about what is going on along Western Boulevard, what is the status of the projects. So I thought it would be helpful to provide some clarification because, yes, there's a lot going on, but there are a lot of different projects going on Western, and each of those have different scopes and timeline. I'm going to give a quick overview of that. So what is being heard tonight is the corridor study that, again, has been ongoing for 2+ years. The primary focus of this project, the primary focus of this project...
Much better, thank you.
Primary focus of this project was to identify the locally preferred alternate route. And then we've had a large focus on infrastructure improvements, again, looking at right-of-way and existing open spaces. How can we do design interventions to make them better public spaces? And then lastly, we took a look at connectivity. Again, the success of BRT is dependent on how well you have a well-connected street grid. So that is the focus of the study. What we did not touch in the study are land use recommendations or zoning recommendations or any impacts on how properties would be impacted, essentially the cross-section of the BRT, because all of those elements that are not included will be addressed and are included in the scope of these other projects. So what are these other BRT projects? So first and foremost, we have the Transit Overlay District Mapping Project, which is the city-initiated rezoning process that kicked off a couple of months ago. We had neighborhood meetings, comprehensive planning staff was leading that, and there's still possibilities for engagement. So this item is going to go to the Planning Commission's Committee of the Whole on April 21st. And again, this is looking to apply the TOD zoning map on several properties along the Western Corridor as well as Southern Corridor. And what it does is essentially open up additional entitlement to properties along the corridor to be more transit supportive. So and it also offers incentives, especially in terms of bonus heights for accommodating affordable housing. So next we have questions about where are these station locations and how would the cross-section of BRT impact my business or property along the frontage. All of those answers would be confirmed by what is called the BRT design project. So that is ongoing, kicked off in early 2021, and they are at 10% design phase. So they are supposed to have a touch point in late summer. Again, that is a process that will confirm the station locations as well as bring out the details of how BRT will be integrated along the BRT corridor. And then we also have upcoming station area planning process, which will be initiated this year, and that is going to look at closely at each of the station nodes or locations and do detailed land use connectivity, looking at affordable housing and also parcel by parcel recommendations. So with that, just a reminder that this is just, I know there's a lot of confusion if this is the final public hearing for Western. No, it is one of the very first ones. And again, looking at infrastructure and a very high level corridor level recommendations. So there's more to come, and there's ample opportunities to look into those specific items. With that, I will try to be brief with my presentation. So the Wake BRT Western Corridor Study was again kicked off to help shape and plan opportunities around the upcoming Wake Transit bus BRT investments along Western. Again, that is the western leg of the BRT that was recommended by Wake Transit Plan, and it is supposed to connect downtown Raleigh to downtown Cary. For the initial phase of the study, which focused on LPA selection, we looked at the entire section between downtown Raleigh and downtown Cary. However, for the planning and design analysis, we looked at the area that you see on this map, which is downtown Raleigh to I-40, which is within Raleigh's jurisdictional limits. We also included about half-mile buffer, which is the shaded area that is the 10-minute walking distance. Also see the dots. Again, these are the proposed BRT stations that came out of the Wake County's major investment study. And then the dashed line, the last one you see, is the preferred route that was selected. It goes along the western extension, or new extension. That street does not exist today, but has been in our street plan for more than 5 decades. So again, a quick review of the scope. We had 3 major categories: land use and market analysis that was led by consultants, HRNA and WSP. They looked at the development potential along the corridor to see what would the capacity be if we had the right or supportive, transit-supportive policies and regulations in place. And the results showed that we could accommodate up to 100% increase in retail uses and almost 50% increase in residential uses. The second category was, again, the LPA, which I mentioned. This LPA was selected by both Raleigh City Council as well as Town of Cary Council in fall of 2020. And the route you see was in the previous map along Western Boulevard extension and going up Maynard and connecting back into downtown Cary. The last segment is what we call the open design opportunities. Again, this was scoped in-house by my team, or rather my ex-team at the Open Design Center. And we looked at improvements, again, physical improvements that could align and complement the upcoming BRT. So essentially looking at open spaces, abandoned right-of-ways, and how can we have design improvements that can enhance the quality of those spaces for pedestrians. This is a quick timeline. We kicked off this project in fall of 2019, huge kickoff, and then we moved into the pandemic. So we had 2 large touch points back with the community, and the last one was when we released the final report in summer of 2021. Again, a quick note here that the design phase focused on the actual engineering and the cross-section of BRT is kicked off around the same time in early Jan. Quick summary of the engagement. Again, we had a huge kickoff event, lots of pop-ups, in-person meetings, and right after the pandemic hit, we had to, of course, change our approach. So we did have to come creative and develop ArcGIS story map as a way to communicate all of the information, provide the interactive platform to engage the community. We had several series of open houses, Q&A sessions, multiple stakeholder meetings, and a lot of one-on-one basis. We had questions, inquiries. So we engaged a lot. And towards the end, we also went to the boards and commissions, especially Appearance Commission, BPAC, and Parks and Greenways Board. And last, when we went to Planning Commission, we did hold additional ASCA planner sessions to, again, hear about any last comments. This is a quick statistical summary of our engagement efforts. Again, there's a lot of numbers but the point I want to make here is that we engaged, while we had to change our mode of interaction with the community, we engaged way more of the members. We had 2,000 plus folks connect, give us feedback, attend survey, provide feedback. And the last report that was released in summer, we had almost 72% in support of the recommendations included in this study. So through all those engagement efforts, what we heard loud and clear were 4 top priorities, and those were the topmost being pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. Again, I think everyone is well aware Western does a great job moving cars, but when it comes to pedestrians and bicyclists, it really lacks the infrastructure. We also identified a few intersections where folks said we need some improvements. There was also a lot of support for additional densities, especially knowing that we have to have density to be able to support the city's longer-term goals of affordable housing. Last but not least, folks were also very interested to support sustainable design practices. Again, it's known that Western is an ecologically sensitive corridor. It traverses several streams and tributaries. So it was interesting to see that being brought up by the community. So through this, the study report, what we did was the entire corridor we divided up into 6 character zones, and each of these zones had unique character, and we, based on the existing conditions and the opportunities, also vary as you move from each section. Again, from downtown, we have very urban environment. You move into the parks and NC State area where opportunities are fairly limited, but then you open up more opportunities west of Gorman. So all of those character zones we analyze, and all of the recommendations fall into 4 main themes or categories. Again, multimodal connectivity. We do introduce several new streets, new bikeways, as well as new greenway connections. In public realm enhancements, we have found strategic ways to look at, again, each zone had very unique opportunities, abandoned right-of-way or something that really could be transformed into something more nice, like a pedestrian plaza or open space, so that, as pedestrians, all transit users are at some point a pedestrian. So to be able to enhance that experience, we had several opportunities identified. Transit-oriented development, we do have 4 different sites that were, again, based on the consultant's market study, were identified as catalytic sites for large shopping centers. And then environmental sustainability, we do introduce several policies and actions that would help promote sustainable design practices, also integrating more green infrastructure and similar practices. So I'm just showing a couple of illustrations just as examples. Sorry, it's just as example. This is a rendering that we show, again, to showing right-of-way improvement. This is the intersection of South Saunders Street and Western. And as you can see, there's level differences. This is abandoned right-of-way space where we have transformed and integrated a stairwell, created a pedestrian plaza with some seating. Again, small placemaking efforts that could really make a huge connection, and especially because this is such an important intersection, especially for the BRT station, but also access into Dix Park as well as downtown South. So adding pedestrian and bicycle amenities, and finding ways to add art and signage for the bridge underneath. So again, these are different ways in which we illustrate those right-of-way improvements. This is just another illustration, again, looking at the Pullen Ash area where the Pullen Bridge is up for retrofit, and so we've been coordinating with NCDOT to see if there could be possibly a redesign of a traffic circle to basically streamline the pedestrian connectivity while integrating BRT. And then so that's just, and this is a section, again, along the new western extension where there's a lot more ecological features. And so we do show examples of how we could have perhaps ways to integrate more green infrastructure, probably a combination of connected public spaces or linear parks. And we introduced a concept called the Green TOD, Green Transit Oriented Development. Again, what it does is it's really integrating the traditional dense, walkable TOD principles with that of balancing with ecological conservation. So it's very popular in the European countries, especially in Sweden. We have great examples, but we also have a few examples in the United States. The example you see here is Thornton Village in Seattle. This is considered one of the green TOD development. Again, the features you see here are integration of green infrastructure, looking at ways development can grapple around and make some of these green features and amenities. So you have like pedestrian plaza, you have the bus stop actually overlooking some of the ecological features, and then density is tacked on away from the floodplain. So those are examples of how we've looked at infrastructure improvements all along the 6 sections, and then we have some corridor-wide recommendations really tying to connectivity. So there's a draft. This is a draft of essentially street connections that we show. Bicycle network, again, we talked about how that's very important to the community. So we have an area-specific guidance map where, again, the catalytic sites are highlighted, and we have greenway access and the GSI opportunities shown. And then we also have the environmental map, again, showing areas that where we could encourage some of those green practices. And so how do all these all of these recommendations move forward, and what is the way we want to implement them? So we do, at the report, we do include a matrix of capital projects. Again, these are all itemized projects for improvements along the right-of-way. We also have a matrix of action items that items we want to do additional studies on, because there are several design concepts that we introduce. Again, those need to be, additional study needs to be done regarding the feasibility of those. And then we have the CP10 package, which is also being heard today. And those, again, are this is the tool we are using to promote some of those recommendations to be adopted into the comprehensive plan. So Section A, there's 4 sections. Section A calls out specific policies and actions. Again, these are taking some of the key recommendations from the report and providing additional guidance as growth and development happens. Section B has area plan boundary considered, so it could be added to the area plan section. We have 10C and D, again, looking at street plan amendments and bike network amendments. I know I will try to quickly show street connections, because again, there has been a lot of discussions lately around street connectivity, and more than 2 or 3 weeks ago we did provide a manager's update with details on the importance of why street connectivity is really critical to the success of BRT. So with that, I'm happy to walk really quickly through just the key ones. So we do have a few street amendments, and the first one is in downtown. And again, this is the one closer to the South Dawson, South McDowell intersection. What we are proposing here is the gridding of the site, the existing RHA site. Again, this is something we are closely coordinated working with RHA because of the Heritage Park redevelopment plan. What they do intend to do is add additional density here to be able to promote more affordable housing units in this location. And what the street grading would do would help create those urban blocks and create more walkable, bikeable connections to the closest BRT station. So that is one. And in this also we show is a cleanup of the ramp area for South Dawson, South McDowell, so we could reclaim land for redevelopment. These are just cleanups of cleaning up some some leftover connections and to keep it consistent with the adoption of the Dix Master Plan. Again, this is some cleanup working closely with NC State University to align these connections with their existing master plan. Ligon Mill Road realignment again to keep it consistent with the redevelopment underway. Beryl Road is also a minor change or designation to work. We spent a lot of time in this area, which is the Jones-Franklin area. And again, one of the challenges with this area is because of the new street connection and the BRT that we introduced, the development pattern in this section is not set up for supporting any type of BRT or TOD development. So we did take a closer look, and some of these connections, neighborhood street connections, are intended to provide a reasonable amount of gridding and connectivity desired to support TOD development in the area. We did have a few connections that were contested that was removed by Planning Commission, but we are really good with where we stand.
Could you speak up a little? We can't hear you.
Oh. Okay. So this is the area we spent a lot of time on, and that's because this is one of the areas compared to the entire stretch where we do not have any basic framework that is supportive of transit-oriented development. Again, because it's a brand new street, so there's a lot of work needed to set the framework for guiding that new growth. And we felt it is important, so we do make some recommendation, and that's what you see in here. Is new street connections between Burton Avenue, Oakdale. We did remove a few connections that Planning Commission recommended, but otherwise this is where we stand with this section. So again, that's the last of my slides for overview. Planning Commission did review, read out a lot on the street connectivity, and they did make recommendations for approval with the amendments that I just shared. With that, I'm done with my presentation. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
So I have a question related to the street grid.
Mm-hmm.
In the last presentation, we heard that most of the grid wouldn't get developed unless, say, if it was going through a shopping center, they would have to redevelop that for that to happen. So this doesn't really apply unless that redevelopment
That's
process
correct.
happens.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
They're always a line on the map until a point of time when redevelopment happens. So that's why a lot of times, like say for instance, the Western Extension, that's been in our street plan for 5+ decades, and obviously we didn't have the need to put it into action. But so yeah, it takes time sometimes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Cox?
Yeah, I just want to say that, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I do think we will have to repeat this presentation when we come back next month, and then so I just want to set the stage for that.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. Any other? Okay. We will start the public hearing then. Now, everybody bear with us. Thank you for your patience. We are going to start with those in support. We have 6 people who have signed up to speak. I'm going to ask you to come up to the front when I call your name. Charles Queen, Jacqueline Pleasance, John Bruckle, Winston Wright, Wanda Burns Ramsey, and Thomas Daly. If you could come to the front. We're going to have 8 minutes per side. So there are 6 of you signed up. I would just ask you to please measure your comments.
Be as quick as I can. I would like to say one thing before we start.
Name and address, please, and put the microphone near you so we can
I
hear
think
you.
it was very deceitful to send the Boylan Heights people a public hearing for Western Boulevard at 7 o'clock when that's not what this was. I've been here for 3 hours waiting to speak for 2 minutes.
Could
That's
we
what
have
it
y-
says on this card.
Could we have your name and address?
My
for-
name is Jacqueline Pleasance. I live at Dorothea Drive, 27603. I've been a Boylan Heights resident since 1989. First rented my apartment in my duplex, and I eventually bought it in 2000. I moved in here in my mid-20s. I'm now approaching 60. I have lived here since before Western Boulevard and Martin Luther King were connected. I live on Dorothea Drive. I look out over Western Boulevard. It's changed a lot since I lived here. When I first moved here, it was beautiful trees and very peaceful. I certainly understand the need for the road. I do support the plan. However, I want to emphasize, as I have in previous meetings, that the buffer on the Dorothea side of Western needs to remain for 2 reasons. Number 1, safety, and number 2, the agreement made with our neighborhood when the road was constructed. Safety, of course, is the most important reason. Traffic very heavy along our portion of the Boylan Heights strip of Western Boulevard. There have been several accidents I have personally witnessed where the cars come through the buffer or into the buffer. If they take that buffer away, or even if they didn't, if they just put a sidewalk there, people would be injured or killed. I've seen the cars come through. I've watched it. It actually needs to be larger. Obviously, it needs to be thicker. It's not even tall enough. All of our houses can see all the cars. And we need more density there, more trees, because it's constant motorcycles, drag racing cars, very, very loud all times of day for the last 10 years. That's an argument for another day, but there's no good reason to remove this buffer, and there's many good reasons not to remove it. And the second reason, of course, is the agreement with the Boylan Heights neighborhood, and I was there when that was made, when they made the Western Boulevard extension, to provide the buffer and the fence and the landscape, and the deal should not be broken, especially when it affects the livelihood and the safety of the residents who live in the neighborhood. And I do think this was very misleading. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles Queen?
Yes. Yes, my name is Charles Queen. I live at 914 Dorothea Drive. I've lived in Boylan Heights since 2012, and one of the things I love best about the historic neighborhood is its strong sense of place it offers while being so accessible to the vibrant city around it. That is a unique balance we should all be proud of. My wife and I have been engaged in the BRT project and planning process from the beginning. We attended the 2019 kickoff meeting at the McCrimmon Center and have since then followed along during the pandemic with various virtual engagement opportunities. I'm here tonight to speak primarily to 2 areas of the parks section of the report as they pertain to Boylan Heights. My desire in bringing these items to your attention tonight is that we could work together to bring about a solution that enhances and balances both the neighborhood's sense of place and the vibrancy of the city. First, as you've heard from Boylan Heights before, our fence and buffer that exists today between Western Boulevard and the southern border of our neighborhood along Dorothea Drive is precious to us. This barrier not only helps cultivate a sense of place for the neighborhood, but serves to reduce the effects of noise, lighting, debris, and pollution that exists today along Western Boulevard. The report commits to maintaining this area. While that's great, I believe Raleigh can do better. There are many tree and planting gaps on the neighborhood side of the fence from trees that have died since they originally planted with Western Boulevard Extension back in the early 1990s. With the future arrival of BRT, proactively replanting and filling in the existing gaps along this buffer with evergreen species would significantly enhance the quality of life for me and my neighbors. Our neighborhood, the Boylan Heights neighborhood, stands ready to assist the city with tree plantings for the betterment of both the neighborhood and the city. The second item I want to bring to your attention is the more complex issue of the proposed BRT station at Boylan Avenue that at the intersection of Western and Boylan. I've heard very little about how a station at this location might impact traffic flow for our neighborhood, especially in relation to the traffic flow into Dix Park. Station design is also an important element that should be considered in a sensitive and thoughtful manner given the proximity to adjacent homes. In particular, how will the station's lighting impact adjacent homes? What about the noise impact of the station's audio system? In my opinion, the current station designs that I've seen indeed show uniformity to the entire system, but do not incorporate any sensitivity to their location as an entry to Raleigh's first historic neighborhood. In closing, preserving the character and quality of life that exists from Boylan Heights while balancing the realities of living in an attractive city is a good problem to have, and I believe it doesn't need to be a choice between two, but instead a collaborative commitment that can benefit both through working collaboratively through future iterations and planning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ma'am, if you could just give your name and address.
Thank you. I'm Wanda Burns Ramsey with Caldwell Banker, Howard Perry, and Walston. I'm a real estate agent, and I represent 6 families, 6 homeowners living on Burton Avenue, Buck Jones Road, and Waycross, and several are here tonight. There are at least 3 properties that are being directly impacted by the expansion. One of those properties is 5723 Waycross. Edith McCornell, the owner, has recently passed. She was a lifetime resident of Oakdale Community, and the property is currently vacant. I have the property listed for sale. Her 3 children are her heirs. They are Cynthia Wilson, Janet Joyner, and James McConnell, and they are all here. Their heirs are in support of the project. However, they would like to request that a recommendation that the city of Raleigh purchase their property, as this property is the only property affected by the Oakdale Street extension. The property is currently listed for $350,000. We have had very interested people, but as a result of the disclosure regarding the proposed project, they have all decided against it. The family would like to ask that the city consider renaming Oakdale to McConnell Road in honor of their parents, grandparents, and aunts and uncles that have lived on that street. I represent the other 2 properties that are directly affected, meaning that the road is going to cross their property, is 228 Buck Jones Road and 108 Burton. The same family owns that property. It's roughly 1.16 acres and currently is a farm. They have been interested in selling for the last 2 years, and this project has had a negative effect on them as well, and they would like to ask the city to purchase their property. I have been in contact with your real estate staff and supplied information to them regarding these homeowners' requests. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Could we put a stop on the clock, please? There were 3 other names, John Brucknell, Winston Wright, Thomas Daly. Are any of you here? Okay. We will continue now with those who signed up in opposition. I have 11 people who signed up. That's going to put you over the 8-minute limit. I will say I see a couple of people signed up who didn't, who are not here. So I'm going to ask that you keep your comments to 1 minute per person, and we'll see where we end up. I'm going to start with Clyde Holt. Is Mr. Holt here? I'm sorry, what?
The meeting said 7 o'clock, so.
Can we find out how many people are here in opposition?
That's what I'm doing. Simon Phillips Hughes. Okay, Ann Craighead. That's Ann Craighead. You're next, Ann. Ann Franklin. Okay, so Ann Craighead is here. Ann Franklin is here. Haley Kinsler is here. Is not here. She's here. Okay. Hua Huang here. Allison Anthony. Is Allison here? Zainab is not here. Tammy Zhao. Okay. Jeremy Gilchrist. And Lindsay Bowen. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you. So try to limit it to, accordingly. We're going to start with Ann Craighead. Please don't take up other people's time, but try to be considerate. And name and address for the record, please.
My name is Ann Craighead. I'm at 508 South Lakeside Drive, which is adjacent to Buck Jones Road. And it is a multinational, multiracial, multicultural area that is in the line of the proposed BRT. I'm here representing a large group of voting neighbors. We agree that the bus system needs to be upgraded, but we are vehemently against and disagree with the route the city wants to use that will plow through existing homes, existing neighborhoods, and existing communities. It's named the Bus Rapid Transit, connecting supposedly downtown Raleigh to downtown Cary. This is not a direct route. It swings through established neighborhoods. It's anything but direct. What this route does do, and I would like to address this especially to the planner, historically, the continuation of Western Boulevard has been in the city plan since 1968. The problem is, during those 50-plus years, the city has allowed the communities of West Raleigh to be developed within this space. Now, using this route, you will take down homes, destroy communities, and get rid of a huge amount of real affordable housing. The route will put a new road through large amounts of waterways and sensitive ecological areas that have never been built on before. This also appears just to kind of be a blatant land grab and a bold attempt to enact gentrification in our area. This will be the total destruction of a multitude of missing middle housing and real affordable housing that the city constantly discusses. Current plans talk about creating walkable neighborhoods, but this bus route does just the opposite by destroying a multitude of actual walkable neighborhoods for a transit-orientated corridor. So is this a bus route, or is it just another road plowing through our neighborhoods?
Hey,
it seems like the
ma'am,
city...
Please speak. Remember, other people need to speak.
Oh, am I talking too long? Sorry.
We're down to almost 5.5 minutes. So.
Okay, I'll just say one last thing. The city seems to be targeting mid to low class neighborhoods, and by developing them into high income neighborhoods, by putting up high density neighborhoods where developers are given a bonus and have to set aside a few unspecified amount of units to fulfill the affordable housing label. Thank you.
The other Ann Franklin.
Good evening, council members. I'm Ann Franklin, 200 South Dawson Street, apartment 410. I'm right across the street. I'll try to be brief. I'm here representing Partners for Environmental Justice. I'm their interim chair. And this is sort of a cautionary talk. I want you to remember, whenever the rezonings come and all the redevelopment proposals come, that all of this land drains into Walnut Creek. So where we already have flooding, and people worry every time it rains whether they're going to get flooded or not, if we push ourselves to accommodate the rainwater on site for every development, we will minimize the impact on people downstream. And it's important to just remember that and ask your staffs and all to help with it. Many developers will say, well, it's too expensive, we can't do it. The green infrastructure part of this proposal is strong, but it could fall away instantly when somebody tells you it either costs too much or they don't know how to do it. So I'm asking you to remember the stormwater impacts. They are not lightweight. They infect every property, and particularly those properties downstream that are flooding. We want to stand with the people who believe we can do more to protect naturally occurring affordable housing. And the study area is so large that when I look at it, and I think other people look at it, they think that everything in the study area is affected by this comprehensive plan adoption. So the more you can narrow it and get specific about exactly what's going to be affected, and I see there's some pieces that do that, but when we look at something like that, the impact feels very, very broad. So I thank you and lead to others. We'll be glad to help if we can on the technical
you.
side and policy side.
Well, and your point is well taken. Okay, we have 3 more people left to speak: Haley Kinsler, Hua Huang, and Tammy Zhao. So we're down to 3 minutes, so if you could limit your time to 1 minute each, we can get all of you in.
All right, Haley Kinsler, 804 Gorman Street, Apartment C. You can actually see where I live on that map. The little dot that says Gorman Street and where it intersects with Western Boulevard, that's where I live. So I just want to start with that. The other thing I want to say is I appreciate that the hearing is going to be left open, but my thanks need to go to Zainab Baloch, Hua Wang, Wanda Gilbert Coker, Faisal Khan, and Mary Black, who held a press conference to bring this issue to your attention, who sent emails and made sure that you were aware that this was happening during the 3rd night of Ramadan. And to my neighbors who cannot be here, Ramadan Kareem, you know, this should not have been scheduled for tonight. One of the streets that is going to be impacted by this is Ligon Street, which is where the Islamic Association of Raleigh currently is. It's very close to me. Not only is this going to affect the Muslim community in my area, it's also going to affect the people that live at Heritage Park, at Method Road, which is the oldest Black community in Raleigh, as well as Kentwood. I just don't understand the lack of community engagement and outreach that has happened on this. For somebody to come up here and say on one side that there's a lot of confusion on this issue, and then on the other side of it say that you've had effective community outreach, doesn't make any sense to me.
You're now cutting into other people's time. Okay.
She said I can keep going.
All right.
I'm just going to say that you should have done better with this, and you shouldn't have planned it. It shouldn't have gotten to this point that people had to have a press conference earlier this week. The people who held that press conference can't be here because this meeting took place during iftar time, which is when people break fast, and it happened during their evening prayer. It's wrong. That's all I have to say on that.
Thank you. Hua? And if you want to leave some time for Tammy.
Okay. Right. So I'll be brief, and I'll jump onto this. So the staff member who just made a presentation claimed that there's a huge collaborative effort for over 2 years. So why is it when I visited the IAR near Method community and talked to the Muslim community, the people there still look so clueless about all this? So in spite of the huge collaborative effort, the city's clearly missed a huge section of the community. Whether it's intentional or not, that doesn't change the fact that the city's idea of huge collaborative effort still leave out Black Muslim and immigrant community. The so-called affordable housing is still a picture of luxury boxes. The urban blocks are gentrification blocks. All the nice things you presented tonight, none of them was designed for the Black Muslim and immigrant communities because you didn't have them in mind when you designed a city for the longest time. The Black Muslim and immigrant community live near Western Boulevard had every right to be concerned and fearful of the city's current Jim Crow tactics and policies. Fourth Ward was once a thriving Black community. Because of the expansion of Western Boulevard at the time, it marked the beginning of the end of the community of Fourth Ward. And today, you're planning a bus rapid transit along Western Boulevard. So it's hard not to see us now that it's disguised to break out large voting blocks in the community. And after all, you just voted a month ago to dilute the voting power of the communities of color. So I leave that to your thoughts. So I hope that you'll provide community residents ample time to review.
Thank you.
And the city should be designing a community based on what the community
Your time
wants
is up. Please
for
be
the primary
respectful
neighborhood.
of
Thank
the
you.
time limits. Thank you. Okay, as we said at the beginning, this would be held open to our May meeting. I want to thank everybody for hanging in with us tonight, and we will hold this open and reschedule it for Well, I'm going to have staff look at a time and day when we reschedule it. We'll just keep it open, come back with some recommendations after talking with the community. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. Anything else? Okay, we are adjourned.
Absolutely.